What's up, Wizards? It is Dev. We are live on Twitch right now with absolutely no net. Tightrope with a lot of slack in it, probably going to fall. And I don't know why I chose Twitch to do this, but I always do. When did this tradition get started? I don't know why I do this to myself, but I know that I do it for you. We are here to speedrun every single card in the entire Lost Caverns of Ixalan Setterini there. So thanks for joining us on YouTube. We got about 50 viewers or so on Twitch right now. Hopefully some more people come in, but if they don't, I'm just glad that you're here regardless of what medium you're here to watch in. Thank you very much. Now, this is hopefully going to be a new PB, but it's going to be tough. I'm going to go ahead and let you know it's going to be really, really tough tonight to make this thing work out for us because there are at least 285 cards in the set, say most of the sites, but if you actually count through them, it sure looks like 300 cards to me, and this folder that I've got for tonight's proceeding says 322 cards. That's a lot. So we're going to try and get through it as quickly as possible, but you know how it is. Just one quick thing before we get into it. The scoring system. I always get questions about this, so I want to try to speed run the scoring system explanation. We score everything out of 5, but I can do quarter points. So, 1.5 or 2.75. So it's actually way more than 10. I'm kind of scoring out of, 20 or something? I'm scoring out of a lot. I'm scoring out of 40? I don't know. I don't want to do the math, but one way or the other, there's an awful lot of scores that a card can get. A score of, let's say, 1.5 is where cards start getting niche playable. 2.5, something like that. That is actually a halfway decent standard playable card. Sometimes it's just really good removal or something like that, or halfway decent removal. A really good removal spell might get 2.75, If a card gets a 3, then it is almost certainly at the very least standard playable, So actual good cards start at 3. I get a lot of people who are like, oh, you gave this card a 3, you gave this card a 3.25, and that's not high enough for me. Well, just trust all I'm going to say. Again, I'm speed running this little explanation here. You've probably seen it before if you've watched my videos or read Luis Scott Vargas's content for that matter, because it's more or less the same scale. If I give something a 3, that means I expect it to be a pretty good Magic card. Not a whole lot in this set is going to get above a 4. Cavern of Souls is in this set. It's probably going to get slightly above a 4. You have to be as good as Cavern of Souls to be that good. So that is about as quick as I can make it. Remember, if I give a card a 2, that does not mean it's barred from seeing any play ever. Right. And also, if I give a card a 3.5, that's amazing. I think it's very good if I give it a 3.5. But that is about it. Again, the only thing that I want to say besides that is don't focus on any one particular card's score because I'm trying to go as quickly as possible. I will almost assuredly be wrong, quote unquote, subjectively on a few of these cards. But if I somehow nailed every single 300 plus card in this set with the exact score that every single person watching the video wanted me to assign to the card, I would actually be more worried that I'm brainwashing you or something, because that would be literally impossible to get every single score right for every single person watching the video. So that's all I'm going to say on that tip. But let's go ahead and get on into it. We got to do every card in this set. And let me show you how serious I am about this. We have got a stopwatch. A lot of people asked for this before. I think it'll be distracting for us personally, but I see in the comment sections constantly, do you want a stopwatch when I do these videos? So we're doing it. And when I say go, we're going to start the actual timer here, but let's take a little bit of a sip. Have a little bit of cough, apparently, and take a breath. Go. Abuelo's Awakening is first. This is the thing that reanimates an artifact or a non-aura enchantment and makes it a 1/1 flyer. You've seen this guy. I actually think this is almost certainly standard playable and could go farther back than that, but not too much farther back. We're talking about Historic and Pioneer and stuff, but that's still pretty good. You're basically getting a zombify for artifacts and enchantments, and that is great with stuff like Portal to Phyrexia in the format. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a starting grade of 3. Remember, 3 is pretty decent, but there's going to be better cards than this in the set. So I do like the scalability and all this. The most I could give this a 3 is a 3.25, but I'm not 3 for this to start things off. Acrobatic Leap is up next, a little combat trick, +1/+3 flying till end of turn. Untap it for 1 mana at instant speed. We've seen this card a bunch of times, and I think this might even be a reprint, but if it's not, we've seen it a bunch of times. I'm going to give this a 1.5. Limited playable combat trick. Adaptive Gem Guard is next, 4 mana for this thing. It's the thing that you tap 2 untapped artifacts or creatures to put a +1/+1 counter on it. You can only do it as a sorcery. It starts as a hill giant. It is not a good card. 1.25. I know that it gets out of control eventually and it might be playable and limited, but 1.25. Attentive Sunscribe is next. This is okay, man. The 2 mana 2/2 when it becomes tapped, scry 1. Limited playable little 23rd card here. I'll give it a 1.5. Bat Colony. I like this. We did eventually end up seeing a bunch of caves that come into play untapped. So you actually can put, you know, apparently my stopwatch is going to go away like every time I switch cards. Is it? That's not a good thing. We'll just look at what the stopwatch is at the end. I'm putting time on it right now. But we did see a bunch of caves come into play untapped. So on turn 3, you can get 3 counters out of, or 3 1/1 guys out of it. And so I think that makes it a really playable Magic card. Like I think that it's pretty decent on curve. So I'm going to give this a 3. This gets a 3 as well, I think. It's right up there with Abuela's Awakening, but Abuela's Awakening will do more in Standard. It's not as narrow as this card, but for the Caves deck, I think this will be a premier card if that deck does anything. And I'm going to give it a 3 because 3/1/1 flyers on turn 3 actually is a very good rate, and it gives you extra candy after that, so I'll take it. Clay Fired Bricks is up next. This is actually kind of cool. Comes into play for just 2 mana. You get a Plains, put it in your hand, gain 2 life. I think Ambitious Farmhand is probably better than this a lot of the time, but it does craft with Artifact for 7 mana, and you get this thing that gives you 2 1/1 tokens and then an Anthem effect. I actually kind of want to compare this a little bit to Wedding Announcement, right? But it cost way too much mana to craft it. It's a ridiculous amount. But in these like mono white decks that play Ambitious Farmhand and Wedding Announcement, Wandering Emperor to get a bunch of tokens and all that stuff, I actually think it won't be too hard for them to craft later on in the game. Get this big +1/+1 to everything. Even if you swing, you've still got 2 2/2s back here to kind of block and stuff, so you're okay with the crackback. I just think this has a chance of seeing 1 or 2 of play, and especially if Farmhand had rotated. This almost certainly would see some play in the mono white deck if that deck is still real. But with all that said, I'm going to give this a solid 2 1/4. I think that it's okay, but well, let's give it a 2.5. I think this is worth the 2.5. I'll give that. Cosmian Blast is up next. 4 damage to an attacking or blocking creature, 2 mana, instant speed. We've seen this card a bunch of times too, and it's fine. Okay removal. I'm just going to give this a 1.75. It's mostly playable and limited, and you do want to play it there. Dauntless Dismantler. I like this guy too. This is the thing. You can pay X, white, sack it, destroy each artifact, mana value X. Also, all your opponent's artifacts ETB tapped. That's really, really sweet. Cool commander playable little thing here, and it's kind of tough to judge what I would give it like in Standard, but there's a lot of commander playable stuff in this set, and I'm kind of judging everything not based on just its Standard playability, but Historic, Pioneer, Modern, Legacy, Commander as well. So this is going to get a couple extra points just because I think it might be Commander main deckable, but it's also, you know, a 60 card format sideboard all-star, depending on the complexion of the format. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a 2.75, something like that. I think it's got a lot of work to do in its life ahead of it. Deconstruction Hammer. This kind of looks like Citizen's Crowbar, but not quite. It's the 1 mana equipment, equipped for 1. Equipped creature has +1/+1 and gets 3 tap, sack, Deconstruction Hammer, destroy an artifact or enchantment. 3 is an awful lot. It's so much mana. It's 5 mana to do it all. If all you want to do is take out an artifact or enchantment, it costs you 5 mana that turn and tap a creature, which is a pretty steep cost, but, you know, you get +1/+1, it's a 1 mana equipment, it's only 1 to equip in the first place, so there are good things about this, but it'll never see the light of day outside of Limited, and it's only okay there, so I'm going to give it a 1.25. Dusk Rose Reliquary, a very, very good card. This is the 1 mana, like, new portable hole thing with Ward 2. Makes you sack a guy when you play it, but it takes anything out, you know, artifact or creature is exiled. That is a good Magic card, no matter how you slice it. One of the better pieces of removal in the set, if not the best. I think it's competing with 1 or 2 other cards. There's really a top 3 here. But if it's not the best, it's in the top 3. So I'm going to give this a 3.25. Again, the best removal spells in the set are going to get that. You know? Decent removal spells get a 2.5, but this will see play in multiple formats way, way back. So I'm giving this a relatively high score, 3.25. Envoy of Okinic Ahu. This, I'm sorry about that pronunciation. I completely butchered it. This is a 3 mana 3/3 that you pay mana and it just gives you colorless gnome creature tokens for 1/1s. Cool little mana sink here. I think it's like pretty playable and limited. I will give this a 1.75. Fabrication Foundry. This is the 2-mana rock, but it only lets you cast artifacts in white. You can also use it to like reanimate an artifact by exiling a bunch of other artifacts, which I think is a cool mode too. So it's kind of a portal deck cooking up in this set with a bunch of stuff that we got, and I think this might go into it. So I think it's a pretty good card. Just 2-mana rocks in standard you have to pay attention to almost no matter what, but not quite no matter what. You know what I mean? So I don't think this dude's amazing or anything, but I will give him a 2.5. He's in that territory somewhere. Family Reunion, a cool little protection spell that also can just cast the spell Charge instead of a protection spell. I like this. I like it a good bit, so I'm going to give it a 2.75. Yep. Get Lost, one of the other top 3 removal spells in the set. There's a black one too, but 2 of the better ones are white. In this case, at least. This is going to be the replacement, or would have been the replacement for Faithful Absence, but it didn't have to be the replacement for Faithful Absence. I think this is really good in a bunch of formats, right? Not just standard, but also Commander for what that's worth. And even going back, I think this is a decent removal spell. I mean, you can read it and tell, right? So it just blows up almost anything, even more permanent types than Faithful Absence, which is great. So I will give this a 3.252. I'm putting it basically the same level as the new Portable Hull. Glorifier of Suffering is kind of neat, actually, and limited. 3 mana for a 3/2. When it ETBs, you can sack a creature or artifact. When you do, 2 guys get +1/+1 counters. So 3 mana for 5 power worth of stats. Okay, so again, it's a decent little bread and butter common for the sack deck and limited. Doesn't do anything outside of that, so 1.5. Guardian of the Great Door. Neat little reanimation target for at least one of the spells we've seen in this set already. But this is the 2 mana 4/4 flyer, but as an additional cost to cast it, you got to tap a bunch of stuff. And so to take on a card like this, it's okay. I don't think that this is an incredible card. I really don't, but it is a very fun reanimation target for like the 1 mana white Unearth that's in this set. So a cool little limited combo there, but we'll see how good it actually is in standard. For the time being, I'm giving this a 2.25. It is probably better than that. Okay, hold on. But this is going to be one that has to prove itself to me. Right. I think that in a couple of months, we might think differently about this card. But if it is, turn 2 every time because you can somehow discard something into your yard and cast a new Unearth on turn 2 every single game, and it doesn't die to cut down, or it doesn't die to go for the throat, then I think you're doing great. But that's a lot to ask. Right. I just don't think it's super consistent. So 2.25 with room to grow. Let me put it that way. Helping Hand. Look at that. They somehow made it the very next card in the set. This is the white Unearth that they printed here. It's not quite as good, obviously, as Unearth. It doesn't cycle and all that. The creature comes in play tapped. So, they nerfed it, but it's still Unearth. Saffron Olive called this Dark Ritual. I don't know if I'd go that far, but it's still pretty good. I'm going to give this... What would I score Unearth? Unearth is fine. It's not amazing. It's fine. I would probably give Unearth a 2.75. So within the context of standard and the fact that now they're also kind of printing an Unearth effect into Pioneer and stuff, I'll give it a 2.75. I know it's a slightly nerfed version, but it's got a lot of work to do in the formats it's legal in, I think. Might come back to reevaluate this one. This might have room to shrink. It might be worse than I think it is. Iron Paw Aspirant is up next. 2 mana for a 1/2 ETBs. Something gets a counter. Perennial limited creature. They had to print bad cards. This is a 1. Kanjali's Dawn Runner is 3 mana for a 1/1 Double Strike. When it ETBs, it explores. So again, fine limited card. Let's give it a 1.25. Cutsel's Flanker. Really like this guy, man. The 3 mana 3/1 flash with a bunch of different modes. Like there's one of the modes make sure there's never a dead mode, and the other 2 are like really specialized, but they're good specialized modes. So I'm gonna give this guy a 3.5. Yeah, I'm going all the way there. I'm going all the way to 3.5 on this guy. I really think that he is very, very good. Almost sleeper territory. I haven't heard a lot of people talking about this guy, but in some ways I think he's one of the better cards in the set. We'll have to wait and see if he really has work to do in standard, because I'm still not convinced, but nonetheless, in a vacuum, this is a very powerful card with a lot of awesome things to do against a bunch of different decks. So I like him. If nothing else, he's a Wandering Emperor. Not quite. No, I understand he's not quite a Wandering Emperor, but you can play him as a flash blocker, gain 2, scry 2. Most of the time, that's going to be up there with the Wandering Emperor. So I think this guy's amazing. I really do. Malamet War Scribe, 5 mana for a 4/3 when he ETBs. Guys you control get +2/+1, so a nice little white overrun effect on a body in this case. I actually think this is an important uncommon and limited. I'll give it 1.5. Market Gnome. Oh boy, it's Market Gnome. This is the guy that wants to be sacrificed in white. When he dies, draw a life, gain a life, draw a card. For 1 mana. On a 0/3, so like he can block against aggro for a couple turns without actually dying. That's kind of cool. But yeah, I love this guy. He's one of my subjective favorite cards in the set. But that doesn't mean I'm going to score him a 5. That's not how this works. I try to be objective. So, you know, this guy definitely has a ceiling. This guy can never be like a 4 probably. So I'll just give him a solid 3, which is honestly probably still too high. Role players almost never get higher than a 2.75. So I am being a little subjective here, but he's so good, man. He's got so much work to do, like possibly even all the way back to modern if Aristocrats wants to be a thing. So this guy's incredible. I'm giving him a 3. Might of the Ancestors. This is actually kind of eye-catching. 3 mana for an enchantment. Beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gets +2/+0, gains vigilance till end of turn. That's better than it looks. It's not amazing, but it's better than it looks. It still won't like see any play, so don't get me wrong, but it's kind of neat. It's sort of an interesting cube thing. It's even an interesting commander thing depending on what your deck is trying to do. So I kind of don't hate this, and I'm going to give it a 1.75. Miner's Guidewing. This one also wants to die, but it's nowhere near as good as Market Gnomes in terms of like white 1-drops that you want to sacrifice. Still cool. When it dies, a creature you control explores. It's a 1/1 flying vigilance for 1. I'm going to give this a 2.25. Sure. Yes, 2.25. Mischievous Pup, a white mane lion that cost 1 extra, but says permanent instead of just creature here. So you can save anything, repeat the ETB trigger on anything. So I actually think that's deceptively powerful in Commander, where it might have some tricks to do. Get it, it's a dog. So I'm going to give this a 2.25 as well. That's higher than I want to go. I really just want to give this a 1.75, but I do think there are available tricks in EDH with it, so let's just go 2.25, sure. Oyer Tak, the Deepest Foundation. This is the guy that triples tokens. It's the first time they've tripled tokens. He can also be a land. That's about it. Land taps are why you can transform it back into the guy for relatively low cost. So if I'm being serious about how I feel about this card in competitive environments, 60-card constructed formats, it's bad. This card's just bad there, but EDH is really pulling the wagon for this card. So I'm going to give this a solid 3, and it's probably going to be one of the more expensive cards in the set, especially like 5 years from now. So probably beloved until the end of time Commander, you know, but you could put this one of 2 ways. Either the Commander score that I have to consider for the card is bringing it way, way up, or the fact that I think it's bad in constructed environments is going to bring it way, way down. You know, if we were just judging for Commander, this would be like a 4, but no. Solid 3, and every single ounce of that is EDH. So let's keep moving to Old Tech Archaeologist. This is 5 mana, 4 and a white for a 4/4 when it ETBs. Do a couple of things. You can scry 3, you can return an artifact. It's 5 mana, so no is my thing with that. Halfway decent limited piece, maybe. Scry 3 is more than you think. That's almost draw a card, you know? But it's not, obviously. No, Scry 8 is not draw a card. Scry 30 is not draw a card. So, you know, as much as people want to say that it is. I'm just going to give this a 1.5. Old Tech Cloud Guard, 4 mana, 3/2 flying. So we got a Snapping Drake that also makes a 1/1 when it comes into play. 1.5. Old Techland Landmark. This is the 1 mana artifact, comes into play, scry 2, craft for 3 mana, and you get a 1/4 flyer. When it attacks, something else gains flying. I have said already, I think this is better than it looks. It looks just like a limited thing, but I think there are decks that could take advantage of this fairly easily. So I am going to give this a 2 out of the gate, and it has a lot of room to grow from there. Petrify, a strictly better pacifism, but that's not really that special nowadays. I'll give this a 1.75. That's really sad. This should at least be a 2, right? It's a better pacifism. Quicksand Whirlpool is 6 mana, exile target creature, but it only costs 3 if it targets a tap creature. Still kind of bad. Really good instant speed removal at common, though, for limited, so do remember that. I'll give this a 1.75, sure. Resplendent Angel. What do you score Resplendent Angel? Back when it first came around, I would have probably called this like a 3.5, but now we've had a whole 2 years with it in standard. It didn't do jack poopy. It did stuff every now and again, but nothing too serious. So will it be better now with different cards in the environment? That could be the key. Who knows? But still, I have to give this like a blanket 2.75 because it's okay, but it's just kind of okay. I do like that we have another life gain payoff in standard. That's cool. But if I'm playing a 3-mana angel, I am playing, the artifact one with prototype that comes down and can give something like flying vigilance or lifelink during the combat step. That guy's amazing. This is not as good as that, and by today's standards, and it wasn't even good by yesterday's standards. So I'm going to give it a 2.75, and honestly, that's a quarter point higher than I want to. Ruin Lurker Bat, yet another white 1-drop with flying and lifelink, and just a 1/1. You scry one if you descended at the end of your turn. It's fine. That's just kind of fine. 1.75. Sanguine Evangelist. This guy's better than he looks too. 3 mana for a 2/1 with Battle Cry. When it ETBs or dies, create a 1/1 black bat with flying. So this is 4 power for 3 mana. It has an ETB trigger and a dies trigger and random, value in Battle Cry, which is better than it looks because it's actually putting more power on the table than it looks like, right? So actually kind of better than it might, because I think some people just like 3 mana 2/1 scuffed, and they move on, but I don't know, dude. I'm going to give this a 2.5. I actually think it could have some things to do, but it is still a little bit scuffed. That said, 2.5 is a pretty darn good score, and I do expect something out of it at some point. Again, cubable, commander card, decent in vampire decks there and all that, but 3 bodies on 1 card. All the bodies can block. The Battle Cry is great. I like this card. Soaring Sandwing is up next. 6 mana, 3/5 flyer with plain cycling. When it ETBs, gain 3 life. That's a lot of decent stuff. Good for limited. 1.5. 1.75. Seriously. 1.5. 1.5 was correct. Blade Wheel Chariot is up next. I kind of think this is cool. It's actually spring-loaded Saw Blades first, though. How did that happen? This is... Spring-Loaded Saw Blades is 2 mana for an artifact with flash. When it ETBs, 5 damage to a tapped creature. You can craft it for 4 mana, and it becomes this 5/5 crew 1. You can also crew it by tapping artifacts. 2 artifacts to be exact. That's actually pretty good. 4 mana to craft, it's kind of a lot, but it's not that much. You're getting a 5/5, and you don't even have to tap creatures to crew it, It was a removal spell when you played it. It has flash. Somebody played Hollow Knight, I guess a bunch of video games have had spring-loaded Saw Blades. Somebody played Zelda, somebody played Hollow Knight, somebody played Castlevania, so cool reference, bro, is all I'm saying. I actually really like this. Think it's way better than it looks. Don't be surprised if you see it on the sleepers list. Don't want to give all the sleepers away in this video, but I think it's actually way better than it looks. I'm going to give this a 2.75. I'm serious. Probably wrong, but I think it's up there. I think this card is potentially quite good. It can kill Sheldred on the front half. Thousand Moons Crack Shot is up next. 2 mana 2/2. When it attacks, you can pay 3 if you do tap a creature. Not a great variant on a tapper, I guess. Let's give it a 1.25. Thousand Moons Infantry, 3 mana 2/4. Untap it during each player's untap step. Kind of cute. Can probably do some righteous stuff, but probably not quite there. I'm going to give this a 1.5. Thousand Moons Smithy. This you can't get during the first turn it comes into play because it says pre-combat main phase to issue a correction. But this is the 4 mana thing that puts Construct into play. And then you can tap 5, including 5 untaps artifact or creatures. And you get Barracks of the Thousand. Not pluralizing the correct words. Pluralizing the wrong words. It taps for a white. But the cool thing about this is that when you cast a spell, an artifact or creature with mana used from it, you get a Construct, right? An artifact... It's creature, power equal to the artifacts you control. Actually, it's artifacts and or creatures you control. So it's even better than a Construct. I think this is kind of great. 4 mana is so much. God, is that a lot. But once this is on the table, something has to be done about it. And before they get the land. And when they do get the land, then suddenly every time they cast an artifact or a creature, they get another creature. And it's just way too much value. I think this is actually deceptively incredible. So I'm going to give it a 3.25. I think this is a very good card. Seriously. Tinker's Tote. Oh my God. This card does everything, but I still can't score it very highly. But I want to do a whole YouTube video. I might just make a short out of it, but I think I could make a 10-minute YouTube video about all the things this card technically does and all of the different mechanics in standard right now that it works with, because it works with stuff I haven't even said. I've said it works with bargain and stuff. Obviously, it works with Descend because you can put it in your graveyard very easily. It works with all the stuff that wants artifacts in this set. It works with the stuff that wants tokens, right, in all the sets that are in Standard. But it also works with like Celebration because 3 different things came out at the same time. This works so well with a lot of different mechanics they printed into Standard in the last like 3 years. So just a really neat card, but still probably won't quite get there. That said, I'm going to give it a solid 2 because I have a lot of love for it. Unstable Glyph Bridge. This also looks crazy to me. This is the 5 mana, kind of a sweeper. Everybody gets to choose a creature with power 2 or less. Actually, you choose. You choose a creature power 2 or less everyone controls. Destroy everything else. You can craft it for 5 mana with an artifact, and it becomes a 5/3 flyer. If an opponent casts a spell during their turn, they can attack you. They can't do that. And then if they attack you, they can't cast spells. So that I actually think is also kind of backbreakingly good. It's a lot of mana to get going. They do get to keep a guy, you know. So I guess there's that. There are going to be situations, though, where like you blow up their Graveyard Trespasser in their shoulder, they don't get to keep anything. You know, their Tenacious Underdog dies too. They just don't have a guy power 2 or less. I think that's cool. But I think this card is also deceptively good. So I'm just going to give this a 2.75 with room to grow at least a quarter of a point. I really want to give this a 3. I think this might be incredible. I think this might be pretty good, dude. Vanguard of the Rose up next. A bad Adonto Vanguard. Seen a bunch of those lately. It's no Guardian of New Benalia. I'm just going to give this a 1.75. Warden of the Inner Sky. I don't like this dude, man. The 1 mana 1/2 soldier. Tap a bunch of guys. He gets +1/+1, scry 1. Only do it as a sorcery. I think sorcery speed is destroying this card. If you have a bunch of artifacts, he gets a little bit better, but still not great. Technically, if you can do this over and over, right? So like, I've seen a lot of people evaluating this card like, oh, you're just going to put counters on him until he gets flying and vigilance. But like, no, over the course of like 5 turns, you can put like a billion counters on him if you have that many artifacts. You know, tap 3 map tokens, tap 3 treasure tokens, 2 counters, you know, next turn, do that again, 2 counters, next turn, do it again, 2. So this dude does spiral out of control and get to like 10 power, but I think you're living in Christmas land and I want to know how it is there. So I don't know, man. Just not a huge fan of this dude. He can spiral, but it costs you, you know? So I'm going to just give him like a 1.75. He might be better than that, but that's what he's getting from me. Akal Pakal, first to unequals. This is the 3 mana 1/5. We're in blue now. Nice. At the beginning of each player's end step, if an artifact entered the battlefield under your control, look at the top 2 cards, 1 in your hand, 1 in your graveyard. So this seems good, but it is a little bit slow to start just slightly. It's going to be hard to proc on turn 3 as well, which kind of sucks. But it can't be cut down in Standard. I kind of like that. So some things going for it, some things against it. It's a neat card in the 99 of some Commander decks too. So I'm going to give this a 2.5. Somewhere in that realm. I don't think that it's super overpowered, but I think that it's pretty good. Ancestral Remnants is the 4 mana. It's Sift. This is Sift from Tempest Block. 4 mana sorcery, discard or draw 3, discard 1. What do we score Sift? 1.5 in today's Magic. Brackish Blunder up next. 2 mana for an instant. Return a creature to its owner's hand. If it was tapped, create a map token. It's just kind of okay. Mostly a limited thing. Won't really do much outside of there. So 1.5. Braided Net. I like this thing a little bit. 3 mana, comes into play with 3 net counters. You can tap it and remove 1 to tap a non-land permanent, and that thing can't activate its abilities either for as long as it's tapped. You can also craft for only 2 mana and get Braided Kipu. This is 4 mana tap, draw a card for each artifact you control, and then put Braided Kipu into its library, the owner's library, 3rd from the top. Kind of a cool card. It crafts for very little. It's a little blue removal spell. It's only 3 to get on the table in the first place, so I don't hate it. I don't think that it's super Standard playable, but I do not hate this card. I really don't. So I'm going to give this a 2.25. It's okay. Chart of Course is up next. What do you give a reprint like Chart of Course that did so much the first time it was in Standard and will probably continue to do some things? I will say the Mono Blue Tempo deck that was in Standard when this first came around played occasionally Terramander and stuff. You know, it played 1 and 2 mana guys for the most part. That deck doesn't do that anymore. You know, it doesn't play like, it's not going to be attacking with 2 or 3 creatures the same turn early in the game like it used to. Now it waits and plays Haughty Djinn or Tolarian Terror on like turn 3, 4, 5 in there somewhere. So I'm just not sure Chart of Course is as good as it used to be, especially with Thirst for Discovery or Discovery which is what's already in that deck that this, could replace theoretically. So I've been talking about it a little bit too long, to be honest, already. But in a vacuum, this is a really, really good card, and could see some play in like the Pirates deck if that's a real deck. But I'm not really sure where it goes in Standard. But in a vacuum, you have to give Chart of Course like a 3. It's 2 mana, draw 2 cards. That's really, really good. It's just very good. Cogwork Wrestler. By the way, I should also point out that yes, you can use this in Reanimator decks too. There, I said it. Cogwork Wrestler. I love this dude. He looks so happy too. Oh, I beat this guy. How did he ever beat this giant? Even with giving him -2, -0. Like, how did you? I don't know. But anyway, all that aside, I've spent too long on this. He's like a 1. No, let's give him a 1.5. He actually will mess up combat math a lot in Limited, but I'm not even sure you play him in your deck to begin with, right? Confounding Riddle. I like this, man. The 3 mana instant speed. What is it? Supreme Will or something like that. Look at the top 4 of your library. 1 in your hand, rest into your yard, or counter a spell unless they pay 4. Really good Magic card, dude. I'm going to give this a solid 3. It should be a little less than that, maybe a quarter point, but big fan of stuff like this. Even though it's going to annoy me for the next 2 years, it's in Standard. I'm still a big fan of 3 years. Is that what we're doing now? But yeah. It's going to annoy me, but I have to admit that it's a really freaking good Magic card. And also fuels Reanimator, fuels Descend too if you're into that. So a lot of cool stuff. Council of Echoes, 6 mana, 4/4 flyer, limited playable only. It's got Descend 4, and it bounces something if you have that count. Pretty okay, but not amazing. 1.5. Deeproot Pilgrimage. This is cool, man. 2 mana for an enchantment whenever one or more of your non-token merfolk become tapped. Create a 1/1 blue merfolk creature token hexproof. I think this is another one of the mistakes I made during previous season now that I look at it again, because I said you just get as many 1/1s as you attack with. That's not true. It says whenever 1 or more. So if you attack with like 4 merfolk, you get 1 guy. That kind of sucks more than I thought it did originally, but I still think the card is pretty good at just 2 mana. And it's probably the best payoff for playing merfolk in Standard. Honestly. So I'm not sure that it's great. It will see a lot of play in Commander, so there is that. Merfolk with activated abilities that tap just became like way, way better, so there is that too. But altogether, is there a way? Is there a way with like Agatha's Soul Cauldron and Standard to like give one of your merfolk the ability to tap and then untap and then tap and then untap and then tap and then untap and just create like infinite tokens? Is that a thing you can do? Maybe. Either way, combo potential aside and all that, just in a vacuum based on pure power level alone, I'm going to give this a 2.5. I think it's a good Magic card. Now, Didact Echo is up next. 5 mana, 4 and a blue for a 3/2. When it ETBs, draw a card. That's a good Magic card 10 years ago, but it also has flying if there's 4 permanents in your yard. That's fine. Again, limited playable if nothing else. It's not Mole Drifter or anything, but we'll give it a 1.25. Eaten by Piranhas. I love this little removal spell here. It's the 2 mana flash aura that makes a dude a 1/1. They lose all their abilities. Losing all their abilities is great, by the way. That's just such a good part of these abilities nowadays, is that they're doing this more often. And I love it. But I actually like this. I don't think it's a great removal spell, but I'm going to give it a 1.75. Basically the same as the pacifism we looked at earlier. I really think this is okay, Locus of Enlightenment, it's actually the Enigma Jewel that's up next. This is a single mana ETB's tap. You can tap it for 2 mana to do activated abilities, but you can also craft it for 9 mana. It's not as much as it looks like because it taps for 2. You can use it to do its own craft. But then you get Locus of Enlightenment. It has all the activated abilities of all the exiled cards used to craft it. You can only activate each of those abilities once per turn. Whenever you activate an ability that isn't a mana ability, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. Sorry about all of that terrible reading there. I don't like this card. I really don't. I like that they've been messing around with activated abilities more. Like they realized that was an untouched sort of design space. So I support that decision, but I just don't care that much. I think that the front half of it is kind of great. It's kind of great, amazingly good. And then the back half, it's like, if you ever actually get it, it's fine, but you shouldn't be playing towards it, In Commander, it's incredible. And even in Standard, it has some things to do like in the Cauldron deck. So I'm going to go ahead and give this like a 3, I should probably at least give it a 3, and it might be higher than that, but, you know, just for the fact that it's a rock that does the thing, well, let's give it a 2.75, because most of the time it's just going to be a rock that does the thing, but very, 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 very effective rock. Move on to the Ever-Flowing Well here. 3 mana, 2 and a blue. When it ETBs, mill 2, draw 2. It has Descend 8, so you can transform it when you have Descend 8. It taps for blue. Whenever you cast a permanent spell used with, with using mana produced by this thing, just read the card, Dev. Up to one other target permanent you control becomes a copy of that spell. So, really interesting wording on this. I think this card is actually kind of great, and this is another one I haven't really heard too many people talk about. I don't think it's going to be too hard to hit the Descend on it. It helps you hit the Descend on it. It's kind of a, reanimation tool, I guess, for some decks too. So there's that. I just think there's a lot of really good things about this card. I really do. You don't have to pay any mana to transform it. It just becomes a land, And the farther back you go, the easier it's going to be with fetch lands and just, ways to easily fill up your graveyard. So, I don't know, man. I think this card has a lot of things to do in its life. So, I'm going to give this like a 3 and stick by it because I do think this card is kind of great. The front half doesn't do much, and you don't want to waste 3 mana playing it and just get punched in the face when you say go. So, I'll at least admit that, but I still think this card is kind of stupid, especially considering that it can flip pretty the turn after you play it. If you play it in the mid or late game, keep mana open to counter or remove a thing and just play it on turn 5, and then just immediately flip it the next turn. I think that's a possibility, and then immediately copy a permanent spell, which seems good too. So I don't know, man. Just keep your eye on it is all I'm saying. I'm gonna give it a 3. Frilled Caveworm is a bad card. It's 4 mana 2/5. It becomes a 4/5 if you descended 4. It's a piece of poop. Let's give it a 1.1. It's a 1. Hermetic Nautilus is next. 2 mana 1/4 Vigilance. You can make it a 4/1 if you pump 2 mana into it. It's kind of a cool little limited thing, but that's about where it goes. Although a 2 mana 1/4 Vigilance, you could do worse than that in standard, but it'll see literally 0 play. I'm going to give this a 1.5. Hurl into History. This is a neat little counter spell that kind of discovers for the spell's mana value. It doesn't kind of do that. It does exactly that. But 5 mana is a lot to cast a counter spell, so I'm going to give this a 1.75. Inverted Iceberg. This is a 2 mana. When it ETBs, mill a card, draw a card. You can craft it for 6 mana into Iceberg Titan. Whenever it attacks, tap or untap an artifact or creature. A little bit scuffed. The ETB trigger's fine for just 2 mana, but we already have creatures that do this. They don't see any play, and I think they'd just be better than this, especially with such a high craft cost. So, yeah, you can bargain it, blah, 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 but this is really not that big of a deal. I'm just going to give this, look at the craft cost again, 6 mana, and you get a 6/6. It could be worse, but it's still just limited playable. So, almost is trying to do a Frost Titan thing. I see what it's trying to do, but who cares? I'm still just going to give this a 1.5, sure. Kite Sail Larcenist. This guy's cool. He does cost a mana too much, and maybe they could fudge with his PT a little bit to get that casting cost down, but it's still pretty good, right? This is the thing that for 3 mana, you get a 2/3 flying ward 1. You can lock down an artifact or creature that a player controls for as long as this is on the battlefield. The thing becomes a treasure. The thing you've targeted becomes a treasure and loses all other abilities. This is rebluval, as I should have called it the other day. Just straight up blue removal. It's not like Brutal Cathar, but it is very, very close, and it flies. It's hard to target. It's got an extra point of, toughness from Brutal Cathar. When did blue become better than white at doing this, So I think this is actually kind of insanely good. It's the best piece of blue removal in the set by a country mile and perhaps even a city mile. So I'm going to give this a solid 3. I was going to say 0.25, but yeah, man. At least a 3 for this. This is quite good. I think this will see some play. Lodestone Needle up next. 2 mana. It has Flash. Oh my goodness. When it ETBs, tap an artifact or creature, put 2 stun counters on it. It crafts for only 3 mana, and you get Guidestone Compass. Pay 1, tap it, a creature you control explores at sorcery speed. Better than it looks too, man. I mean, the craft cost is relatively low. The casting cost is low. It's not blue removal necessarily, but 2 counters, 2 stun counters at flash speed. Yeah, I'll kind of take this in limited. And I might even take it slightly outside of there. I might take it to the fair, you know. I might actually take it where people can see me and it together in public. I'm going to give this a 1.5, but boy, it has a lot of room to grow. That's the lowest score I've given to a card I like. And that's because I actually think this is probably scuffed and doesn't see too much play in standard. But in limited, I think this is 2 stun counters is a lot, especially when you get to play this on their turns. 2 stun counters is longer than it sounds. That's pretty good. But anyway, Malcolm, Alluring Scoundrel up next. 2 mana for a 2/1 flash flyer. When he deals combat damage, put a chorus to a player. Put a chorus counter on him, draw a card, discard a card. If there are 4 or more chorus counters on him, you can cast the discarded card without paying the mana cost. It's just like solid card, dude. Flash flying 2/1 is not playable by itself, but when there's gravy on it, we get to start talking, you know? So maybe you proliferate the counters, but then you're probably playing bad cards in your deck, you know. It's like, by the time this does 8 damage, by the time it's been on the table for 4 turns and they haven't cut it down somehow, it'll start casting free spells. But even if you only get 1 or 2 swings in with it, you're getting in 2 damage at a time. You flashed it in during your opponent's combat step. Maybe you use it as a removal spell. You can do that. That's a mode on it. But if nothing else, maybe it'll filter like 2 cards for you and deal a decent little chunk of damage. So it's okay, you know. I'm going to give this a 2.75. I think it's all right. Marauding Brinefang is next. 7 mana for a 6/7 Island Cycler with Ward 3. It isn't very good, even with the Island Cycling, but, you know, all these Island Cyclers are playable and limited. Somebody called me on this and they were correct in the comments section of one video. It doesn't go for a basic land or anything. It goes for an island, so you can get like triomes with this and, you know, dual lands that have the proper types, but I still don't think it makes it very good, obviously. So I'm just going to give this a 1.25. Merfolk Cave Diver. 3 mana for a 2/4 whenever a creature you control explores. This gets slightly bigger and can't be blocked till end of turn. Hallelujah, but it's still not great. This will win you some games of limited, though. The blue like Simic Explorer deck, this will win you a game or 2 or limited. So I think it's a fine uncommon there, but doesn't do much outside of there, obviously. 1.5, because it'll win you some games there. Oaken Siren, this thing's cool, man. 2 mana, 1/2 flying vigilance, tap for a blue, but only for artifacts. So actually pretty cool. You know, I gave the white artifact rock ramp guy for 2 mana. Just adding qualifiers to it. I gave him a decent score, and I'll give this a decent score too. I'll go 2.5 on this. I think that the fact that the white one can like reanimate stuff later in the game is really ridiculous. This doesn't quite do that, so its score takes a hit, but it's still a decent little, you know, mana dork for depending on what you're doing. Yeah, Oyer Pakpatik, Deepest Epic. This is 4 mana. 2 and 2 blue for a 4/3 flyer. It's a god. It's a legend. And whenever you cast an instant spell from your hand, it gains rebound. It's just absolutely nuts. And then when this dies, you transform it into Temple of Cyclical Time. It taps for blue. You can pay 3, tap it, transform it back into Oyer Pakpatik. So, cool dude. I'm not sure how much play this sees either, but an instant gaining rebound is crazy. This seems like it was part of the Commander product, and they're like, screw it, throw it in the standard set. You know? But it's kind of a tough one to judge, because it's usually going to have to be out for a turn, especially if you played it on curve to actually do anything. And usually cards like that aren't great in standard, but if it does die to removal, you get a land, and the land can change back into the guy, you know. So it's probably at least halfway decent. I'm going to give this a 2.75. Orazka Puzzle Door, a single mana for an artifact. You pay 1, you tap it, you sack it, look at the top 2 of your library. 1 goes into your hand, 1 goes into your yard. So this effect again, but it's on a 1 mana egg. And it cracks for just 1 mana, so it's halfway decent. I don't hate this, man. As far as role players go, I do like it. I will give it a 2. Just a straight up 2. Out of Thin Air. 4 mana for this counter spell, but if you're Essence Scattering, it only costs Essence Scatter. It really costs double blue, which isn't quite Essence Scatter. I think this is neat. That's about where it ends, though, so I'll give it a 1.5. Pirate Hat. I wish this was a better card. 2 mana for an equipment. It equips for 2, but it equips a pirate for 1. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has whenever this thing attacks, draw a card, discard a card. It's not great. I'll just give this a 1.5. Relic's Roar, a single blue mana for an instant. Till end of turn, an artifact or creature becomes a dinosaur. Artifact. It's a 4/3. Again, till end of turn. It's no. Nah. Do you use this in limited? Is this actually just a sneaky removal spell in limited that's actually really, really good? Maybe. But that's kind of hard to say. So I'm just going to give this a 1 1/4. River Herald Scout. 2 mana. When it ETBs, it explores. It's a 1/2. Not a Branch Walker. It is not a Merfolk Branch Walker, but it's trying really hard to be one. It's just not good. I mean, the best you do out of this is a 2 mana 2/3. A 2 mana 1/2 draw a card. Now we're talking. 2 mana 1/2 draw a card's way better, right? So I'll give this a solid 2. Sage of Days, 3 mana 3/2. When it ETBs, top 3. Put 2 in your graveyard and 1 on the top is what this is going to read most of the time. It's not great, right? 1.75. Self-Reflection. We've seen this card a billion times. 6 mana to copy a creature, but you can flash it back for 4. Pretty cool. Flashback cost is reasonably low, but it's still clone. You're still casting clone. In standard. But maybe you mill this into your yard and do something with it. I'm still not that impressed. So I'll give this a 2.25 for potential commander playability, but I'm not even sure it's there. Shipwreck Sentry, 2 mana 3/3 defender. If you get an artifact under your control, it can attack as though it didn't have defender. That's fine. 1.25. Sinuous Benthazar is 6 mana for a 4/4 when it enters the battlefield. You look at the top X. X is the number of caves and caves in your graveyard. Put 2 into your hand, the rest on the bottom. So 6 mana is too much. It just is too much. 1.75 though. Song of Stupefaction is 2 mana. Enchants creature or vehicle. When it ETBs, you may mill 2, but enchanted permanent gets -X -0, where X is the number of permanent cards in your yard. It's pretty bad. Does mill you 2 though. Some decks might want that, but maybe still not enough, you know. So 1.25. Spyglass Siren, a single mana for a 1/1 flyer. When it ETBs, map token. Pretty good, dude. Actually pretty freaking sweet. So I'm gonna give this. Ooh, that's tough. I'll give this card a 2.5. I'm serious. I think this is a really, really good 1-drop. Just fantastic. I would probably give Voldaren Epicure a 2.5. This is up there with Epicure. So, yeah, sure. Staunch Crewmate, 2 mana for a 2/1. It's kind of a Glint Nest Crane, but it can also find pirates from the top 4 of your library. Good card too, man. This dude, this almost always draws a card when it comes into play if you built your deck correctly, and he plays in a bunch of different stuff. He doesn't just have to be in a pirate deck. He'd be an artifact deck too. Not an embarrassing stat line considering he also replaces himself in your hand when you cast him. So I don't know, dude. I really like this guy. I'll give him a 2.5 as well. I think he's very, very good. Subterranean Schooner. This is 2 mana for a 3/4 crew 1. When it attacks, target creature that crewed it this turn explores. Better than it looks. Still not amazing, but better than it looks. Shouldn't have been a rare, but but that might be because it's halfway decent and it's easy to slip past you, you know. Maybe not quite a sleeper, but not taking it out of contention either, man. I've liked this card ever since I first read it, and I like it even more the more I think about it. So I'm gonna give it a 2.25 with a lot of room to improve. Tishana's Tidebinder, 3 mana for the 3/2 flash. When it ETBs, counter an activated or triggered ability. If an ability of an artifact, creature, or planeswalker is countered this way, that permanent loses all abilities for as long as Tidebinder remains on the B field. One of the best cards in the set, I'm fairly convinced. Has labor to do in multiple formats all the way back, especially even in Modern, where it's a great counter, probably at least, to the One Ring. If you're a good counter to that card, you might see some play, but even if it's not quite good enough to, take the One Ring out of Modern playability, I don't think that's going to happen, to be honest. But even if it doesn't, then it's still really good in Standard. This counters a bunch of important stuff. People ask me what, and I've already listed what like a million times, but just like Sheoldred triggers, you can counter with this and then blank the Sheoldred while this is in play. Wandering Emperor, any Planeswalker, it's unbelievable against, but especially the Wandering Emperor, because they thought they were going to just blank your attack step, but instead, you're still attacking with that guy. They didn't gain any life. You didn't lose your dude, and now they can't activate their Wandering Emperor for the rest of the time Tidebinder's in play. So, It's just a very, very silly card. And that's just a couple of things in Standard you can do. There's a lot more. Atraxa is obviously a big one. They get to keep their Atraxa. Obviously, you still have to do something about the Atraxa, but them not getting the ETB trigger is huge. Same thing with the Tally and all that. So this just does kind of it all right now in multiple formats. And I've already talked way too long about it. So I'm just going to give this a 3.5. I think a 3.5 is probably about where this sits. I know I've already scored a card 3.5, so it feels like this should be like 3.75. But at the end of the day, I think this will do less than everyone thinks it's going to do, while still doing enough to justify a 3.5. Unlucky Drop is up next. 4 mana for an instant. Target artifact or creature's owner puts it on the bottom or top of their library. If it were just the bottom, that'd be way, way better. But they get to choose to put it on top, so it's not good. At instant speed, this is getting there. Like, it almost feels like blue removal. And it is, for what it's worth, but it's still not great. You know, you're just going to redraw it. But sometimes, you know, redrawing it's going to feel really bad. They'll put it on bottom, and then at that point, it, like, eases blue removal, right? Like, 100%. But it still costs 4 mana, so I don't know. Blue's removal is getting way better the last couple of sets, but it's still not up to snuff compared to the other colors. But that's because the other colors get such ridiculous removal. Like, blue has to do this to keep up. I think it's fine, but obviously no standard playability or anything. 1.5. Waterlogged Hulk up next. A 1-mana artifact tapped to mill a card, craft with an island for 4 mana. You get a 4/4 Vigilant Crew 1 vehicle. And if you descend at 8, it can't be blocked. That's actually good. I talked to good ways about this in the preview video, and I won't belabor it here, but I think this is also a pretty decent card. Some blue vehicles in the set look great to me, if no one else. This is kind of neat, right? So I'll give this a 2.25. I think it's close, but not quite. Waterwind Scout, 3 mana for a 2/2 flyer when it ETB's map token. Strictly Better Windrake. I like a 1 mana 1/1 flyer that does this, but 3 mana is a little bit too much. You've seen the things we can do with 3 mana in Standard, so I'm just not convinced this is great. In Limited, good little bread and butter common. You'll probably play it. Map tokens are good, but still. 1.75, sure. Waylaying Pirates is 4 mana for a 3/3, so that's a hill giant. When it ETBs, if you have an artifact, tap target artifact or creature an opponent controls, put a stun counter on it. A hill giant that stuns a thing. It's actually not terrible in Limited, man. 1.5. That could be worse. Have you seen the things you're doing? Like, you know, you're playing a hill giant in Limited in 2023, and they're paying 4 mana for a dinosaur that is God knows how big. So, you know, 4 mana is a lot for a hill giant. But when I say that, by the way, I just mean a 4 mana 3/3. But stun counter is okay. That's kind of okay, but it's still just a 1.5. Zoetic Glyph. We talked a good bit about this card. 3 mana for an aura that enchants an artifact. It makes the thing a 5/4, and then when this is put into the graveyard, you discover 3. I can't really give this more than a 1.75. I just can't. Abyssal Gorestalker. We're in black, everybody. This is the 6 mana Barter in Blood. Everyone sacks 2 guys when it comes into play. It's a 6/6. This is like a 1.75. A 1.75, and that's super generous. Aklazot's the Deepest Betrayal, 5 mana for a 4/4 flying lifelink. When it attacks, each opponent discards a card. Each opponent who can't, you draw a card. Whenever an opponent discards a land card, create a 1/1 black creature token with flying. When Aklazot's dies, return to the battlefield tapped and transformed, and it becomes Temple of the Dead. It's taps for a black, and of course you can pay 3 mana, tap it, and transform it. Play this ability only if an opponent or if a player has 1 or fewer cards in hand and only has a sorcery. I don't know if I've caught before that it's a player. For some reason, I just keep thinking it's your opponent has to have 1 or fewer. You can have 1 or fewer too and activate this. That's sick. It's really good. This guy's great. Not the best stats in the world at 5 mana, but I think lifelink means an awful lot. The fact that he can come back means a lot. This attack is crazy. This attacks discard a card. Nuts. That's nuts. And then if it can't do that anymore, it gives you the value and lets you draw. That's so stupid. If they pitch a bad card, a land, you get a 1/1. Like, the card is just so well designed. You know, good God. Like, it looks like they pushed it, right? Like at first, 4 mana or 4/4 flying lifelink. When it attacks, they discard a card. It's like the baseline. And then they were like, well, what if they can't? So let's make a mode for that, okay? And what if they decide to get smart and start discarding land cards? Like they just draw land and don't play it, and then they discard those. Okay, well you get bats for that. Like they thought of everything that a player will do to get around this ability. You know what I mean? So that's really good to me. Again, 4/4 is kind of making me balk a little bit on giving this a really high score, but I am still going to give it a 3.25, I think. It's just really good. There might be too much exile removal, with like Leyline Binding in Standard right now. The Wandering Emperor in Standard right now. Is this really good? Are any of these really good? Do we not learn our lessons from the Kamigawa Dragons? Dice triggers never actually happen. It's just a 5-mana 4/4 flying lifelink. Do you play Boonbringer Valkyrie? No, you don't do that. I want to be cynical in that way, but I just think there's too much value on this card. I really do. 3.25. Acolyte of Aklazats. This is 3 mana. A 1/4 vampire cleric. Tap it, sacrifice another artifact or creature. Each opponent loses 1, you gain 1. Why does it tap? Why does it tap? I don't know why it taps. I mean, if it didn't tap, then it would be busted, right, in Commander and all that. And possibly even Standard, because you sacrifice your whole board and they die. But tapping just makes this so slow. It's just too much. I would normally love cards like this, and I'd be the one telling you, like, oh, you get multiples of them out. But even then, I want to like this more than I actually do. So I'm just going to give it a 1.25. Another Chance is 3 mana, 2 and a black for an instant. You may mill 2 cards, then return up to 2 creature cards from your yard to your hand. So looks pretty bad, but this is actually instant speed draw 2. And that's good. Also mills 2 cards for what that's worth. You might want that. Also makes it to where, like, you can do this on a dry graveyard and still get 2 cards. It's not likely to happen, but it's possible. This is better than it looks, is all I'm saying. Draw 2 at instant speed for 3 mana in black. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to actually give this like a 2. Because it's good. So let's move on to Bitter Triumph. This is the other in the top 3 removal spells in the set. 2 mana for an instant. As an additional cost to cast it, discard a card, pay 3 life. One of those things. Destroy a creature or planeswalker. Super clean, super gross. Infernal Grasp, extra life, also targets planeswalkers. You don't have to lose any life to it, right? You can just discard like a big fat guy and then reanimate the big fat guy later. This just, I've looked in mono black so many times in the last like couple of months for like a good reanimation plan, and it's only the 3 mana Liliana, but now we have this and like the 2 mana Lurgoyf guy that you have to discard a card to play him. We'll get to him in a minute. Those are so good for mono black reanimator, dude, but I just love this spell. I love it. I think it's a wonderful removal spell. I will give this a 3.25. Bloodletter of Aklazats. 4 mana, 1 and 3 black for the 2/4 flyer that makes an opponent lose twice as much life whenever they would lose life. Remember that attacking for damage causes loss of life. Red-black, are we going to do a red-black burn deck where we stoke the flames for 8? Are we going to do that? Where we lightning strike for 6? Do we even have to do that? Can we just cast this and then cast Corrupt and win? Can we just do that? If we Corrupt and we have 6 swamps in play, they're going to take 12. It's disgusting. This was supposed to be in the same standard as Invoke Despair. Can you imagine? Can you guys freaking imagine? This was going to be in the same standard as Invoke Despair. They banned that card, but they weren't going to. They're just going to let it happen. Actually, no, Kamigawa would have rotated, wouldn't it have? Yeah, Kamigawa would have rotated. But can you imagine this curving into an Invoke Despair and like you lose like 8 life? Oh, that'd be so gross. This is really crazy though. This another cynical bit of me wants to be the Magic player that's like, it doesn't really do much turn it comes into play, even though it does. It does. You can attack and it's doing something. Like, oh, it didn't do much, and it just dies to removal, and it's got low power toughness, and like, I could be that guy, and part of me wants to be, and say, like, everyone's going too crazy for too little on this card, but I just can't tamper down, like, how much I like the card, like, if nothing else in Commander, it's a ridiculous piece, so I'm going to give this card a 3.5. That was a lot of wind up to tell you I'm about to give this card a really high score. Yeah, higher than this removal spell. Yeah, this is one of the better cards in the set to my mind. I know it dies to removal. So does Shieldred. What would you score Shieldred? 3.5? 3.75? 4? Would you give Shieldred a 4? You know? So I don't know, man. I think Shieldred's probably a better card than this, all things considered. But they both have the problem that if they sit and play for too long, they do too much, you know? They're a must-kill threat. This flies, too. Shieldred doesn't do that. It's kind of a 4/4 flyer when you think about it. This card's very good. 3.5. Bloodthorn Flail, man. Yeah, I know it's only on your turn. It is only on your turn, but you know what I mean? I can still play with fire and stuff. You know, I can still lightning strike on my turn, stoke the flames on my turn. Bloodthorn Flail is up next. A single black mana. Equipped creature gets +2/+1. Equip 3, pay 3, or discard a card. Really cool. Doesn't look that great, you know what I mean? But I like this. An Unholy Strength, effectively, that sticks around. You can discard a fat guy to this, too, by the way, and then just reanimate him later if you want to do that. One thing that I'd like to do with this is just, you know, play it in a mono black aggro deck that has like the prototype Phyrexian Flesh Gorger. You know, the 3 mana prototype, 3/3 menace, lifelink, ward, pay, whatever. Pay its life. Pay its power and life. Ooh, that's kind of interesting too, right? This guy with Phyrexian Flesh Gorger, because they have to pay its power in life if they want to target it. So in this way, they'll lose twice as much life if they try to target your Flesh Gorger. They could lose up to 14 life targeting a Phyrexian Flesh Gorger. That's a neat thing I hadn't thought of yet, but yeah, Bloodthorn Flail, you can just discard like a fat guy in your yard and get him back later. Also goes very interestingly on curve with the Raven Man. If you haven't seen that yet, you know, you play this turn 1, Raven Man turn 2, discard a card and attach this. You got a 4/3 Raven Man and a 1/1 token EOT. So that seems like a decent way to get a game of Magic started on the play to me, but I don't know. I think there's something to this is all I'm saying, but I'm not going to score it too high. Let's give it a 1.75. Bringer of the Last Gift, 8 mana, 6 and 2 black for a 6/6 flyer. When it ETBs Living Death, just read the text of Living Death and it does what this card does. So that's kind of interesting. It does say if you cast it, so you can't like reanimate it. It'd be a little bit too much. For some reason, this reminds me of like the dinosaur boss from Chrono Trigger. And it's probably just because of these 2 like dinosaur skulls flying out. Nothing about the creature itself reminds me of that boss. It's just these 2 dinosaur skulls. But this guy's not actually that good. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to give him like a 2 and move on. Blood Rage Mycoid is 4 mana for a 4/3. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, you get a 1/1 black fungus that can't block. Cool. It's too much mana to get started, but it is common. Little bread and butter dude and limited too for certain decks. I think that even the Aristocrats decks really like this just for sacrifice fodder. So not too hard to descend. He's decently well statted in that environment. I'm just going to give him a 1.5, but it is a every turn token maker that's not really hard to, you know, trigger. So I think he's kind of cool. Canonized in Blood. This is 2 mana for an enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. You can also pay 7 mana and sack it to get a 4/3 flyer. It's not good. The card looks pretty decent, but I'm pretty sure it's not actually that decent. I've heard people say this is just a Luminarch aspirant. It's not. You're nuts. I don't know, man. I don't think it's that good. So I'm just going to give this a 1.75 as well. Chupacabra Echo, 2 mana for a 3/2. When it ETBs, a creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. X is the permanence in your yard. It's actually pretty decent. I'm going to give this a 2.5. I think there are definitely applications for this, but it's a lot more narrow than the original Chupacabra, which I would have given like a 3 pretty easily. Corpses of the Lost. I like this card. 3 mana, 2 and a black. Skeletons you control get +1/+0, have haste. When it enters the battlefield, you get a 2/2 black skeleton pirate creature token. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, you can pay a life. If you do, return corpses to its owner's hand. So you cast it, you get a 3/2 every turn, so long as you're descending, but it's tying up a lot of your mana. Card's not actually very good, but Skeleton Anthem effects excite me. That said, I'm not going to give this more than like a 2, and Commander is doing all the lifting there. Dead Weight, a classic card. What do you give a Dead Weight? You give a Dead Weight 1.75. Deathcap Marionette. This is the 2 mana 1/1 Death Touch ETB's Mill 2. I'm excited for precisely 1 deck, but small dudes with Death Touch, I have a special place in my heart for them, period. So you get a 1.75 as well, sir. Deep Goblin Skull Taker. What a great name. 3 mana, 2/2 menace. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended, it gets a +1/+1 counter. So within a couple turns, it can be like a 5/5. It's not terrible, but it's only limited playable. That said, it is common, but it just doesn't grow very fast, does it? 1.25. It's not great. Deep Cavern Bat is pretty good. A 2 mana 1/1 flying lifelink. When it ETBs, look at their hand, exile a non-land card until this leaves the battlefield. What a ridiculous card. We've seen this ability be great in the past when it was even more restricted on Kitesail Freebooter. This is Freebooter. This is less restricted than Freebooter. So it's just, in my mind, better even with the lower toughness and all that. So I'm going to give this 3.25. Right now, I'm serious. It should probably be closer to a 3 because it's more of a role player, but this is a very good Magic card. Make no mistake. Defossilized up next. This is the 5 mana reanimation spell of the set, but it makes the thing explore twice after you reanimate it. It's actually not terrible, so I'm just going to give it a 1.75. Not super playable in this environment where you have just better removal or better reanimation spells, but still, it's kind of nice. Echo of Dusk is 2 mana for a 2/2 Vampire Spirit with Descend 4. If you got 4 things in your yard, it gets +1/+1 as lifelink. That's fine. That's just kind of fine. The lifelink's going to be decent limited, but it's just fine. 1.5. Fanatical Offering. It's not Deadly Dispute. It's the card in the set that isn't Deadly Dispute. You Deadly Dispute, but instead of a treasure, you get a map. It's fine. 2? Sure. Let's give it a 2. I know people are going to get mad at that because Deadly Dispute's a 3.5 or something, but this doesn't ramp you. It doesn't ramp you, guys. Sorry. Fungal Fortitude is up next. 2 mana for an aura with flash and enchants a creature. The guy gets +2/+0. When it dies, it comes back tapped. Usually these effects will cost 1 mana. So there is that. But this one gives you a power boost. It has flash. It's trying to make up for its 2 mana in ways, but I'm not sure it quite makes it there. 1.5. These are fine effects, though. Gargantuan Leech. 8 mana for a 5/5 lifelink that costs 1 less to cast for all your caves, including the ones in your yard. You get this down to 1 mana, it's really good, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen quickly, I think they probably costed this for limited and nothing beyond that, so let's give it a 1.75, sure. Grasping Shadows. Cool card. 4 mana for an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control attacks alone, attacks exalted, it gets Death Touch and lifelink. And then this gets a Dread counter. When it has 3 Dread counters, transform it into Shadow's Lair. Taps for a black, but you can also pay a black, tap it, and remove a Dread counter to draw a card and lose a life. That won't happen until turn 7. That's a long time to wait. However, in Commander, 4 mana is a lot to pay for this, but what it does for you the turn it comes into play is actually kind of decent. Death Touch and lifelink for an exalted guy is okay. It really is. So I want to dislike this and I want to like this at the same time. There's a part of me that's like, this is way too much mana. There's a part of me that just thinks it's cool. And it gives you a land that draws you cards too. Like, what do you want? I want it to not be so freaking slow is what I want. So I'm just going to give this like a 2.25, but it's probably not even that good. I don't even know if it's that good. We'll move on to Greedy Freebooter, baby. A single black mana for a 1/1 human pirate. When it dies, scry 1, get a treasure token. This is a 3.25. This is a 3.25. What did I get? No, let's just say 3. Let's just say 3. I think I gave Market Gnome a 3, and I want to give this the same score I give Market Gnome. Again, you can't get too high with these just 1 mana guys, but I really like these dudes. And I think a solid 3 is about where I want to be with this. I think in a lot of cases, it's going to be better than Shambling Ghast, much better than Shambling Ghast in a lot of cases. And that card is nuts, especially combined with Deadly Dispute. But it's because you get 2 treasures. You'll get 2 treasures off of this if you Deadly Dispute it, but we just don't have that line in Standard. Either way, I don't want to recap everything I just said about it the last day of previous season. I will say, though, that this is ridiculous. A 1 mana 1/1 guy that pays you back when he dies, and a scry, too. Like, oh, God. So crazy. Solid 3, man. Solid 3, dude. Join the Dead is 3 mana. Creature gets -5/-5 at instant speed. But if you have Descend 4, it gets -10/-10. This is not like Tragic Slip, you know? Not at all. It's not Dismember. It's not like any of the cards it's trying to remind you of, but it is like halfway decent limited removal at common, so keep that in mind. I'd probably play like every single copy of this that I got in limited. So there's that. Let's give it a 1.5. Malicious Eclipse. Whew, this is 3 mana, 1 and 2 black for a sorcery. Everyone gets -2/-2. But if a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. Doesn't count your dudes. That's really good. Sideboard play in standard, almost certainly. Let me throw that out there, especially for aristocrats decks and decks that play their own creatures and want to do stuff out of their yard. So just a really, really cool card. It's just better than Cry of the Carnarium, and that was a great card. So I'm going to give this a 2. Solid 2. It could even, let's give it a 2.25. Can we do that? Can we give this card a 2.25? Yes, thanks. Mephitic Drought. Can even be a 2.5. Mephitic Drought is the 2 mana artifact. When it ETBs or is put into a graveyard, you draw a card, lose a life. So kind of a black Ichor Wellspring or whatever it's called. Very popular commander card, I guess. But I just think it's fine. I think it's a decent little egg, you know what I mean? So I'm going to give this a solid 2 and not really too much more. That's why this card really should be like a 2.5, you know what I mean? So I think that this is a little bit better than the standard like 1.5, 1.75 pushed in limited. I think this is about a 2, which means that Malicious Eclipse probably should be a 2.25, 2.5. Preacher of the Schism. This dude's cool, man. 3 mana for a 2/4 Death Touch. When he attacks the player with the most life or tied with the most life, you get a 1/1 white vampire with lifelink. When he attacks while you have the most life or are tied, you draw a card and lose a life. That's so awesome, dude. So good. I'm not sure the stats are quite there, but the Death Touch is going to help an awful lot with that. So I think this dude is better than he looks. I haven't really heard many people talk about this guy either, but he's awesome. So I'm going to give him a 2.75. I think he's great. Primordial Gnawer up next. 5/2 for 5. When he dies, discover 3. Piece of crap. 1.25. Queen's Bay Paladin. 5 mana for a 5/4. When it ETBs or attacks, return a vampire from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. Lose life equal to the mana value. So good. I think this is also pretty decent. It is 5 mana, and that's a lot, but it's putting decent stats on the table too. It's almost always going to put like at least 8 power on the table. You know, get Graveyard Trespasser back or something. 8 power, 5 mana. You gain the life back from Graveyard Trespasser when it comes into play. All that. Like, it's, you know, could end up being really, really good. Sucks that it only hits vampires, but there are plenty of decent vampires to hit, whether you're hitting Trespasser or Olivia or Xander. I think he's a vampire too. Is he a vampire? He might be. No, Xander's not a vampire. Either way. There are good targets for this in standard, but it is a bit vampire specific, so I'm not going to score it too high. I'll just give it a 2.25. Rampaging Spiketail, the swamp cycling big man of the set. I'm just going to give this a 1.25. Yeah. Ray of Ruin is 5 mana for exile a creature, vehicle, or non-basic land, and then scry 1. Neat. Creeping Mold. Sort of. Like, what if black had Creeping Mold? Would it be this card? You know, something like it. It's a pretty decent spread of permanent types. It's always going to hit something, but it's still 5 mana sorcery speed. It's bad, so 1.5. Screaming Phantom, 3 mana, 2 and a black for a 2/2 flyer. When it attacks mill a card, it's not, obviously not great. 1.25. Skullcap Snail, 2 mana for a 1/1. When it ETBs, an opponent exiles a card from their hand. Not as good as the thing we looked at, the bat, Deep Cavern Bat, but still better than a Burglar Rat, like strictly better than a Burglar Rat in just about every situation. That's what strictly better means. So I'll still have to give this like at least a 1.75, at least, you know. Soul Coil Viper, the doomed necromancer of the set, but not quite, but kind of a little bit. So I like this though. I think anytime you see Doomed Necromancer, you have to give it like a 2.5 at the very least. Is that about what Doomed Necromancer is? 2.75, something like that. But I don't think he's quite there. 2.5 at the most. 2.5. Souls of the Lost. I was talking about this a second ago. The 2 mana star, whatever. As an additional cost to cast it, discard a card or sack a permanent. And it has power equal to the number of permanent cards in your yard. Toughness equal to that plus 1. Again, amazing like discard outlet for mono black reanimator if that's what you want to do. So like that about it. But I think this is silly. I think this is very silly. It counts permanents. It's a Lurgoyf that doesn't care about creatures necessarily, just permanents. I will say this is slightly more susceptible to like one-sided graveyard hate than the usual Lurgoyf, because a lot of Lurgoyfs just care about the number of creatures in all the graveyards. So if they exile your graveyard, it's a 0/1, and that sucks, you know. But still think there's an awful lot of upside to this, man. I'm gonna give this card a solid 3. I think that it's a role player more than a lot of things. It's not the next Tarmogoyf or anything, but it is a very powerful card. So we'll start at a 3 and see if it goes from there. Stalactite Stalker. Talked a good bit about this 1-drop on stream last time we were here. A single black mana for a 1/1 menace. Beginning of your instep. If you descended this turn, it gets a counter, a +1/+1. But you can also sacrifice it to give a creature -X/-X, where X is equal to the power. It costs 3 mana to do that ability, but you can do it at instant speed, which I think is pretty cool. Just for a 1-drop, this has a ton of value on it. Like, so much value. So I'm gonna snap off a 2.5 for this card, and it's probably higher than that. But it is fairly narrow. It only goes on like the one kind of deck, so we'll say 2.5. This could definitely grow, though. This could definitely... Let's go 2 3/4, just so I feel okay with myself. 2 3/4. This is a really good 1-drop. I really think it is. Starving Revenant, man. This is an interesting card. 4 mana, 4/4 when it ETB Surveil 2. Then for each card you put on top of your library, you draw it and you lose 3 life. Whenever you draw a card, if you have Descend 8, if there are 8 or more permanent cards in your yard, target opponent loses 1 life, you gain 1 life. So you kind of get Keza, the Esper legend from a few sets ago. Neat. All around neat things, right? This is kind of a 4 mana draw 2 if you want to pay that much life. Kind of a 4 mana draw 2. You can also just mill yourself 2. You can do some version of both of those things. And then obviously once you've descended 8, it's got really good value on it. Not quite like Sholdred, right? But it's whenever you draw cards, a little bit of life drain. So I really like everything this card is doing. I think it might be a little too expensive, and obviously if you want to draw both cards, it's a huge chunk of your life in Standard, although not anywhere near as much in Commander. So with all these different factors kind of swirling around, I'm still going to give this card... I'm going to give this card a 3. That sounds like too much. Even as I say it, it sounds like too much, but 4 mana, 4/4 draw 2 and more gravy? Yeah, it's probably at least a 3. That's very good. No matter how you put it, that's very good. Stinging Cave Crawler is up next. The 3 mana 1/3 Death Touch. If you have Descend 4, whenever it attacks, you draw a card and lose a life, which is kind of neat, but only kind of neat. A good card in Limited, though. I'm going to give this a 1.75. I like it. Synapse Necromage is the 3 mana 3/1. When it dies, you get 2 of those fungus guys that can't block. Cool in the Aristocrats decks. 3 bodies for 3 mana. Basically, that's almost always going to be good. But in this case, it's a little less good than it should be. So I'm just going to give it a 1.75. Tarian's Journal here is 2 mana. You can tap it and sack a creature or an artifact to draw a card. Do this as a sorcery. Pay 2 and discard your hand to transform it into the Tomb of Aclazotz. This taps for black, but you can also tap it to cast a creature spell from your graveyard. If you do, it enters the battlefield with a finality counter and is a vampire, in addition to its other types. Whew! Okay, so 2 mana starting cost to actually get into this, and then only 2 mana to flip it over. I don't know why no one's talking about this card. It draws you cards, and that sucks because you want to discard your hand eventually, right? But it's a 2 mana, like Mazemind Tome or Reckoner Bankbuster, 2 mana thing that taps to draw cards. You can sacrifice crappy little artifacts to do it, map tokens, whatever. Who cares? You know, sacrifice artifacts, draw cards. That's awesome. You can do it with creatures too. Okay. That's actually busted to me. I think that's good just in and of itself, but it is a really low cost to, tap. It's just 2 mana to transform it. You do have to discard your hand, but what if, here's a crazy idea, you don't have any cards in your hand. Or what if, okay, I'm discarding my hand, but what if I could cast spells from my graveyard? Oh yeah, I can. If I discard my hand, did I really discard my hand if my hand was like 2 creatures? No, I can just cast them out of my yard. So like, why isn't anyone talking about this card like at all? I think this card's busted, and I'm going to give it like a 3 1/4. I think I'm right. I want to give it a higher score than that, but I'm not going to. But just last thing on this, I think I'm right. I think this card is unbelievably good. I really do. But we'll move on to Terror Tide here. 4 mana for a black sweeper. It's a sorcery. And all creatures get -X till end of turn, where X is the number of permanents in your yard. Pretty good. Pretty good. It's no depopular or anything, but like black will take the sweepers where it can get them. And I think it's probably better than Drag to the Bottom, which I would score reasonably high, So I'm going to give this a 2.75. I think it's a pretty good Magic card. Maybe in the context of like Sunfall being in Standard right now, which is another reason all these things that like die and they transform into lands aren't good, is because Sunfall is amazing. But in the context of a format where Sunfall is an available card, it does get worse. But in a vacuum, it's at least a 2.75. It might see some Commander play too. Tithing Blade up next. This is just a Edict effect. It's 2 mana. They sack a creature, sorcery speed because it's an artifact. But if you craft it for 5 mana, you get Dogged Pursuit. It's bad. I mean, at least it's a removal spell. On the one half, it's a removal spell. It's common too, which I think is kind of interesting for Pauper. But it's a common removal spell. So that's the floor. The floor is pretty high on this card, and that's what you want. But eventually you get Dogged Pursuit, which is actually not great. It's not a great card. So I'm just going to give this a 2, just right at a 2. I think that's where it sits. Visage of Dread. This is a 2 mana discard spell that you can craft for 6 mana. And when you do so, you get a 5/4 when ETBs are attacked. You may mill 2 cards. Don't have to, but you may. This is worse, I think, just slightly. Although both of these are doing the same thing, right? 2 mana effects that you get in black. One of them's an Edict. This one's a discard. I will say the Edict effects are usually instant speed. Discard effects are always sorcery speed, so you're not really losing that much with this card, You're only getting artifacts or creatures from their hand, which is not a great spread of permanent types, but it's still like the going rate for a discard spell most of the time, So it's fine, but I'm just going to give this like a 1.85, Not quite a 2, slightly higher than a 1.75. Vito's Inquisitor is a hill giant. It's a 4 mana 3/3. Pay a black, sack an artifact or creature, put a +1/+1 counter on Inquisitor, and it gains menace till end of turn. Really decent in limited. I think as a common, this will be a super bread and butter, very commonly seen piece in the limited Aristocrats decks. It'll be very good there. It'll grow to a 6/6. You can do it all in one turn. It's good there. I think you want to pick up every copy if you're in the Aristocrats deck. Obviously, it's no Bartholomew, but it's like the next best thing you're going to get in the limited, Aristocrats deck. That said, 1.5. A Braid. What do you give a card like a Braid? 2.5. A Braid gets a 2.5. Ancestor's Aid. This is the combat trick that gives you a treasure token for 2 mana. Better than it looks, but still probably not super standard playable. It might be decent in Pirates decks that want treasure tokens, artifact decks that want artifacts, right? But I'm still not really sure that it sees any standard play. So I'm just going to give this a 1.75. I do like a spell that ramps me. And a combat trick that ramps, okay, like we're talking, but we'll see. We'll see. Belligerent Yearling is the Dino 2-drop, 3/2 trample. Okay. And then you can have its base power become the power of any dinosaur that ETBs under your control. That's kind of cool too. Great 2-drop to make sure that deck gets, to stay aggressive. Even if you don't play another dinosaur on like turn 5 or something, it still has like not embarrassing stats for what you paid for it. It tramples, which is nuts because like, on turn 3, you're going to play, what is it? The Hammer Skull, Pugnacious Hammer Skull, 3 mana 6/6 dinosaur. And so you played this on 2. On turn 3, you get to attack with a 6-power trample guy. If you did that sequence correctly, right? So just a really good, like the 2-drop that dinosaurs decks wanted all the way back to Pioneer. So good card. 2.75. Am I serious? Yes, 2.75. Bone Horde Dracosaur. This is 5 mana for a dinosaur dragon. We finally got those creature types. It's a dinosaur dragon. Kind of looks like a vampire to me for some reason. Like it looks like it's going bleh. Anyway, it's a 5/5 flying first strike. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. If you exile a land this way, create a 3/1 red dinosaur creature token. If you exile a non-land card this way, create a treasure token. So you're telling me this is a 5/5 flying first strike, draw 2 cards every single turn, and sometimes get a creature, sometimes get a treasure, without even having to cast the things? Like, this card is busted. Like, I know it's 5 mana. 5 mana is so much, but if nothing else, its commander playability is going to shoot its score through the roof for me. But I think this could be a standard playable card. I really do, you know, like if this stays in play for one turn, it effectively draws you 2 cards and possibly gets you a creature. Like, oh my God, the card is pushed to the moon, baby. Like, I think this is dumb. Like, 5 mana is so much. One more time, I don't want to repeat myself too often, especially during a speed run. I am fully willing to admit that 5 mana is a lot, but draw 2, throw creatures onto the table, ramp me, like, and it's got like really good stats for the mana cost, especially when you throw on first strike. This card is bonkers, dude. I'm going to give this at least a 3.25, but my inclination is to give it a 3.5 because I'm such a Timmy. And 5 mana, 5/5 flyers still impress me too much. But like, what actually impresses me on this is draw 2 cards a turn. Like, in mono red? Are you serious? You really want to give me that ability? This card is nuts, guys. I promise you this card is nuts. 3.25 at the least. So Brass's Tunnel Grinder is next. 3 mana, 2 and a red. A legendary artifact. When it ETBs, discard any number of cards, draw that many +1. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended, put a boar counter on it. If there are 3 or more boar counters, transform it. Then you get Teculatlan. I still can't do it. The Searing Rift. It taps for red, but when you cast a permanent spell with it, you discover X. X is that spell's mana value. Isn't that busted? Isn't that insanely busted? But this you play on turn 3, and then it's going to take like 3 turns to actually transform it. So on 3, and then it gets countered that turn. So it transforms on turn 6, and you're probably not going to actually use it till turn 7 because it transforms on your end step. So unless you flash something in with it, which could be cool. It could be cool to do that, but still, you get my point. It's going to be very late in the game this actually starts doing anything, but that might not be bad in, you know, a red X control or, you know, slow rolly kind of mid-range deck. I think this is okay, but still too slow. Still a bit too slow. And if you do, you know, waste your turn 3, you're going to get your face punched in. But we talked about a blue card like that earlier, and I like that card. So, I don't know. That card, it's possible to flip like basically the turn after you get it. You can't do that with this. It always needs 3 boar counters. So if you play it on turn 6, it's going to be forever in the game until you're actually able to do it. And then you actually have to have permanent spells left over to cast. I'm talking too much about this card. But all that's to say that I do a lot of thinking about it, and I'm still not sure if it's actually good. But I think there's something there, so I'm going to give it a 2.5. Commander playable, right? I don't know. 3 turns in Commander's a lot too, right? So, 2.75. 2.75, sure. Brazen Blade Master is 3 mana, 2 and a red for a 2/3 Orc Pirate, and if attacks while you control 2 or more artifacts, it gets +2/+1. So paying 3 for a 4/4. So long as you have like 2 treasures or something, which shouldn't be too hard. To have a couple of map tokens or whatever. So maybe in the Pirates deck and limited, it's bread and butter, but aside from that, it's garbage. So let's give it a 1.25. Breaches the Eager Pillager. This is 3 mana for a 3/3 first strike legendary Gobbo pirate. Whenever a pirate you control attacks, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn, create a treasure token. Target creature can't block this turn, or exile the top card of your library. You may play it this turn. Cool thing about this is that if you attack with 3 pirates, you get all 3 triggers. It's cool. It's not whenever one or more you attack or whatever. Or yeah, whenever 1 or more pirates you control attack. So just a couple of these abilities are good enough. Create a treasure token is obviously very good, but target creature can't block this turn is better than you think it is. And then obviously drawing cards is also good. So, you know, first strike is also a neat ability on this card. So I like this. It kind of reminds me a bit of the 3 mana vampire guy that like Florian, that's his name. Whenever you attack and deal combat damage, you get to draw like some number of cards. Like look at the top X cards and get one. So this is kind of like that. A 3 mana, you know, creature type specific, 3/3 first strike, almost exactly the same as the vampire guy. He can create card advantage like the vampire guy, but he can ramp you. You know, he can get your aggro guys through. So I'm going to give this guy a solid 2.5, and he could actually be slightly better than that. Burning Sun Cavalry is 2 mana for a 2/2. When it attacks or blocks while you have a dinosaur, it gets +1/+1 till end of turn. Limited playable, not much else, 1.25. Calamitous Cave-In, 4 mana. I know, by the way, I don't want to waste time, but some people are going to be like, oh, in the dinosaur deck, it's a good 2-drop because it's a 2 mana 3/3. Maybe. but doubtful. And it's not always, it's not always a 3/3. Like, even if you do have a dinosaur, it can still get played with fired or cut down and all that. So it's worse than you think. I'm just going to give it a 1.7. Let's give it a 1.75. Sure. Calamitous Cave-In, the sweeper for the cave decks. It's 4 mana for a sorcery that deals X damage to each creature and planeswalker. X is the number of caves you have in your graveyard and in play. Great card. I think this is actually really good. If it's just 4, even if you don't have a cave in your graveyard, on turn 4, usually going to deal 4 damage. Awesome. That's good. Later in the game, it'll deal 6, 8, and just blow up everything, including every planeswalker, even if they have a lot of loyalty. So this is just a really good sweeper, guys. I'm pretty sure this is an amazing sweeper. Very narrow, obviously, specific to the cave deck, so you can't score it too high. Doesn't go in everything, but man, in those cave decks, it's really good. So I'm going to give it a 2.75, almost a 3. We were verging on 3, very, very close with this one. Child of the Volcano, 4 mana, 3/3, tramps at the beginning of your end step. If you descended this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So again, over turns, this one will get bigger and bigger. It'll be a 6/6 trample, but that takes forever. Limited playable. It's common. Keep that in mind, but still no more than a 1.5. Curator of Sun's Creation is 4 mana for a 3/3. Whenever you discover again for the same value, do it once a turn. That seems gross, but it is 4 mana. I'm going to give this a 2 and see where it goes, but it probably doesn't go too far. Daring Discovery, 5 mana for a sorcery. Up to 3 target creatures can't block this turn. Discover 4. That's neat, but not. Maybe it's better than I think. Maybe it is, but I want to like it more than I do. I'm just going to give this a 1.25. Although I think anything that discovers 4 might be better than 1.25, but Diamond Pickaxe is the 1 mana indestructible equipment. The creature gets +1/+1, and when it attacks, create a treasure token. You'll equip for 2 mana. That's too much, probably, to play and equip this, to be honest, for such a low power boost, but obviously it ramps you. We've already talked about the little combo. You can put Zoetic Glyph on it, make it a 5/4 indestructible on turn 3. That seems exciting, but that's mostly a limited thing to be doing. All that said, I'll go with 1.25 on this. Let's go 1.5. Let's go 1.5 on this. Dinotomaton is 4 mana for a 4/3 minnow, and when it enters the battlefield, target creature you control gains minnow until end of turn. It's pretty poopy. Honestly, it's just fine. 1.25. Dire Flail is a rare for some reasons because it's kind of like a Bone Splitter. This is the 1 mana equipment that gives the creature +2/+0 and equips for 1. You can also craft it with an artifact for 5 mana and make Dire Blunderbuss. Equipped creature gets +3/+0 and has. Whenever this creature attacks, you can sacrifice an artifact other than Blunderbuss. When you do, the creature deals damage equal to its power to target creature. This also equips for 1. That is an awful lot of text. It really is. I'm not sure that it is worth crafting this. I'm really not, but sometimes it will be just so you get like a pseudo removal spell when you go to attack and get in that last little bit of damage or whatever. So sometimes it might be worth crafting this, but in the meantime, it's a 1 mana and it crafts and it equips for just 1, and it's +2/+0, so it's halfway decent just for that reason, if nothing else. 2.5. I'm serious. 2.5. Dowsing Device rather, is 2 mana, 1 red for an artifact. Whenever it or another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, up to 1 target creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains haste till end of turn, and then transform it if you have 4 or more other artifacts. Transforms into Geode Grotto, which taps for red. But you can also pay 2 and a red and tap it until end of turn. Target creature gains haste and gets +X/+0, where X is the number of artifacts you control. Do this only as a sorcery. Sorcery speed does kind of suck on the land half of this, but it's not too hard to get the land half of it. And in the meantime, it's giving you, little power toughness bonuses and haste in your artifact deck in red, and, aggressive artifact deck. So pretty narrow, honestly, but not really when you consider that 4 artifacts isn't that tough to get, but you definitely have to build your deck in a specific way to make this happen. You know what I mean? So I'm just going to give this 2.25, but it's probably slightly better than that, to be honest. Dreadmaw's Ire is up next. A combat trick, a red mana for an instant. An attacking creature gets +2/+2 and trample. But it also has, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, destroy target artifact that player controls. Well, that's very nice. And it gives it trample too, right? To make it more likely to deal combat damage. This is kind of a beating. This is kind of a beating. There's going to be situations where you keep your creature in a situation where they thought they were going to trade. You keep your creature, theirs dies, and you blow up an artifact. That's going to feel disgusting. Like when it actually does happen. And you get dual combat damage to them too, which I didn't think was going to happen. So, I don't know, man. I think that Monstrous Rage is just the better card. This is obviously just situationally good and standard, but I still think it's okay. With all the stuff they threw on this card, I'm going to give it a 2. I really am. I like this thing. I just think when it does pop off, like, it wins the game, dude. Like, it snaps off when it pops off. But Enterprising Scallywag, this is the thing I made the worst mistake of spoiler season on. This is 2 mana for a 2/2 Gobbo Pirate at the beginning of your end step. If you descended this turn, make a treasure token. I think that I got excited about this card and I said, like, all you have to do is cast an instant and you descend. No, that's not true. It has to be a permanent, Dev. Yeah, it has to be a permanent. That was probably my worst mistake this spoiler season. I want to correct that right now in case you haven't seen me correct it yet. But anyway, yeah, if you descend and make a treasure token, fine. That seems fine. Not amazing, but fine. I'm going to give this a 2 1/4 just because of the ceiling. The problem with this card is that it could just be a 2 mana 2/2 and never do anything besides be a 2 mana 2/2. And then it's really bad. The floor on this is low, but the ceiling is so dang high, I'm just going to throw a 2 at it and see what happens. Itali's Favor is 3 mana for an aura, enchant a creature. When an ETBs discover 3, enchant a creature has +1/+1 trample. I've talked about how these things that discover, these auras that discover, pay you back for getting 2 for 1. Zoetic Glyph does it when Zoetic Glyph goes to the graveyard. This just goes ahead and does it. You know, like here. You stuck the enchantment, I will immediately pay you back. Trample is also pretty good, but this is 3 mana, so it's bad. I don't make the rules. You'll never play this in your standard deck. It's 3 mana for this. That's not good. I know it discovers. I know, it says it right there. You'll never play this card a day in your life, probably. So I'm just going to give this a 1.5. And that's too high. Geological Appraiser is not Bloodbraid Elf. It sure looks like Bloodbraid, but I'm pretty sure it's actually not Bloodbraid. It is a mono red one though, and I'm kind of into that. So let's just start this card at a 2 and see what happens, man. And yeah, that's low. 2 is low compared to like Bloodbraid Elf. What would I score Bloodbraid Elf? A 3, something like that. But this thing really has to prove itself to me. It really does, man. I do think it's cool though. It's a pretty cool card. Let's give it a 2 1/4. Screw it. Let's give it a 2 1/4. Anyway, Goblin Tomb Raider is up next. Oh, Lara Croft over here. It could be a 1 mana 2/2, but that's if you have an artifact. If you control an artifact, it gets +1/+0 and has haste. Otherwise, it's just a 1/2. It's a good card though. It's a good card. This obviously has a pretty, clear ceiling on it and all that. But I think the farther back you go in formats, probably the better this becomes. If you can just throw a Mox down on turn 1, then you're probably not playing this in your deck. You're just playing Ragavan instead, right? But it's still if you throw Mox Ruby down on turn 1, you can play this 2/2 haste and still have mana left when you play your lands. So all I'm saying is all I'm saying, but it's not too hard in standard either to starting on turn 2 have artifacts. Just play one from your hand, So I don't know. It could be something there. I'm going to give this card a 2.5. 2.5, sure. Gold Fury Strider up next. This is 5 mana for a 3/5 tramps, and you can tap 2 untapped artifacts or creatures to have target creature get +2/+0 until end of turn at sorcery speed. It's actually kind of dangerous looking, right? Because, in Commander, just tap like 50 things, and then, but it's at sorcery speed. It costs 5 mana. It's just way too much. Even though they did give it trample, right? So I can tap down like 8 of my map tokens and treasure tokens and crap like that. And that is a lot. That's so much. 2, 4, it's +8/+0 basically. This guy will get through for 11 trample. So yeah, it's neat. Limited playable, not much else. 1.75 though, because of the sort of open-ended nature of cards like this. Hit the Mother Load is 7 mana. That's so much. 4 and 3 red. Discover 10. If the discovered card's mana value is less than 10, you get a number of tapped treasure tokens equal to the difference. It's not good. It's just the gimmicky giant red card of the set. I will say it pays you back. If you discover and you get Play with Fire, it gives you 9 treasure tokens. So it kind of ramps you, right? a lot. So this could do cool stuff, but I don't know, man. It seems kind of gimmicky to me. It's a little scuffed. Let's just give it a 1.75 and move on. It probably doesn't deserve that. Hotfoot Gnome is not Reckless Stormseeker. It's the creature in the set that isn't Reckless Stormseeker. This gets a 2. Idol of the Deep King is 3 mana for a flash artifact. When it ETBs, it deals 2 damage to a target. You can also craft with artifact for 3 mana and get Sovereign's Maquahidal. This attaches to a creature when it ETBs. The equipped creature gets +2/+0. I don't hate this. I like that the front half has flash, but I still don't think it's really that playable at the end of the day. So I'm just going to give this a 2 and move on. Inti Seneschal of the Sun is 2 mana. Seneschal of the Sun is 2 mana. 1 and a red for a 2/2 legendary human knight. Whenever you attack, discard a card if you want to. When you do, put a +1/+1 counter on an attacking creature. That creature gains trample till end of turn. Whenever you discard 1 or more cards, exile the top card of your library. Play that card until your next end step. So you are discarding cards, but you're not actually losing any cards. This pays you back the cards when you discard them. So that's kind of cool. And obviously, creatures can get pretty big. It can put the counter on itself. That's cool. It's 3/3 trample as early as turn 3, 4/4 trample after that. Drawing cards the whole time. I mean, it's just really good. Even if you have a 1-drop and you play this on turn 2 and attack with the 1-drop, you put a counter on it, if you discard a card. So a lot of use for this. I think it's actually pretty sweet. Probably sees play in mono red, but it has to be better than Feldon. And it doesn't even have to be better than Feldon. You might just play it alongside Feldon. So mono red has a weird hole in its 2-drop slot where you could play Bloodthirsty Adversary. You could play Feldon. There's a few cards you could play, but they still need another good card. And I think that this is right there. Also, again, I'll say this, if Madness gets reprinted in one of the next few sets, then suddenly this card is unbelievably good. There's a few cards like that in this set. But I do like it. I think it's a solid 2-drop that has a low floor. It's just a 2-mana 2/2, but it does something potentially the turn it comes into play. It snowballs. Trample matters an awful lot, and it kind of draws you cards. You throw away chaff, you might get stuff you want. So I think it's sweet. I really do. I'm going to give this card a 3, just a solid 3. I think it's fantastic. Yeah, it's also a Descend Enabler. Good point on that, too. Magmatic Galleon. 5 mana, 3 and 2 red for a 5/5 vehicle with crew 2. When it ETBs, it deals 5 damage to a creature an opponent controls. Whenever 1 or more creatures your opponent control are dealt excess non-combat damage, create a treasure token. So there's 2 5-mana red cards in the set that I freaking love, right? There's the thing that draws you 2 cards every turn and you get like free creatures, free treasure tokens and stuff when you get lands off of it. That guy. And then there's this. I really like this too. And I'm having a hard time choosing between the two of them. However, for like constructed formats, usually the thing that has an ETB trigger is going to be better. 9 times out of 10. And this has a ridiculous ETB trigger. The ETB trigger on this is destroy target creature, create a treasure token. That's crazy. I really want to hammer home how good that is, man. 5 mana is a lot. I'll say it again, but crew 2 is reasonably low. Like, you can crew this. 5/5's a lot. 5/5 is a big man. So I see people kind of pretending this is just remove target creature and get a treasure token. It's not that, you also got a 5/5. Just throwing that out there, man. But yeah, just it destroy target creature, create a treasure token is like, that's kind of unbelievable, dude. If it were a 5-mana sorcery that said that, you wouldn't play it, would you? You wouldn't. You'd be right not to play it. But as a actual like body, like, it seems good, dude. That seems so good. I'm gonna give this a 3.25. I know that's actually less than the other 5-mana red guy, and I said this is probably better in constructed formats, but I think that other guy who draws you to a turn, his commander, playability is really carrying him a good bit. And I will say, if he stays around for like 2 turns in standard, he wins you the game. This doesn't necessarily win you the game if it sticks around. It might just win you the game the turn you play it. But this, make no mistake, one way or the other, this is a very good card. This is a very, very good card. Oyer. Yeah, non-combat damage is awkward, but you're in red, and it's worded that way so it creates a treasure when it ETBs, right? I should point that out, by the way. Before I move on, I should point out that, like, it's going to create a treasure almost every time when it ETBs. You kill a Shieldred, it doesn't make a treasure, but you killed a Shieldred, you're happy. If they play another Shieldred, you can block it, you know, or attack into it too. That's cool. But yeah, if you Lightning Strike a 2/2, you get a treasure token beyond the first one it created. That is also gross. So, even if the card never attacks, it's not like it's just sitting there doing nothing. If you Stoke the Flames a 2/2, you get a treasure token, and that's really good. That's really, really good. But Oyer Axonil is next, the Deepest Might. 4 mana, 2/2 red for a 4/4 god with trample. He's a legend. If a red source you control would deal an amount of non-combat damage less than Oyer Axonil's power to an opponent, that source deals damage equal to Oyer Axonil's power instead. When Axonil dies, return it to the battlefield tapped and transformed under its owner's control in the Temple of Power, which taps for a red. Or you can pay 3, tap it, transform it back into the guy, but only if red sources you controlled dealt 4 or more non-combat damage this turn, only as a sorcery. This is the worst of these, I think, because if you can deal 4 or more non-combat damage on like turn 6 when you would want to do this, you're doing really well in your red deck, baby. You're doing so well. You probably just won the game if you dealt 4 damage. You don't even get to really transform it because you already won, right? So I don't know, man. Even in big red, I'm not sure. You're going to get to the point where, like, after the sweeper, after this guy dies, you're just like crushing for 4, but maybe you are. Maybe it's easier said than done, and this is easy to bring back, but I think a lot of the other ones are easier to transform than this. And it's just a 4 mana 4/4 trample. It's, it takes more to actually get it to do stuff than some of the other ones too, because like all it really cares about is red burn spells and like It's good though. It is decent. If you can untap with it and play with fire, 1 mana 4 damage. Lightning Strike, 1 mana 4 damage. And that's without the use of Anthem effects or other ways to make his power bigger. There are ways you could cast a pump spell on this guy in one turn, like cast Monstrous Rage on this guy or something. And then suddenly everything's doing like 7 extra damage, so, or 7 damage. So it's just that there are good things you can do with the dude, but I want to be more impressed. He does kind of combo interestingly with Magmatic Galleon and curves with him too, right? So that's kind of cool. Because, if you have both in play, Magmatic Galleon and Oyer Axonil, you're more likely to like Lightning Strike something and get a treasure because of it. So again, neat little combo there, but I don't think he's amazing. I'm just going to give him like a 2.75, that's a good score. That is good, but I don't think he's as good as some of his brethren or just some of the other good cards in this set. So let's move on to Panicked Altasaur, 5 mana for a 4/5 reach. Tap it for 2 damage to each opponent. I kind of like that. Soul Cauldron, right? Just throwing Soul Cauldron out there. If somehow if all of your dudes can tap to deal to actually hold on, that works, right? That works. I guess if you had enough guys out, it's not even sorcery speed. You can do it during your opponent's turn. Yeah, you exile one of these with Soul Cauldron, and then all of your guys with counters on them can tap to deal 2 to each opponent. There's probably much better ways to win the game with Soul Cauldron, but it's a neat thing to be able to do, right? That's cool, but still, 1.25? It's not a very good Magic card. Plundering Pirate is 3 mana for a 3/2, and at ETBs, create a treasure token. Not as good as Jewel Thief, but I do like Jewel Thief, so I'll give this a 2. Poetic Ingenuity is 3 mana. Whenever 1 or more dinosaurs you control attack, you get that many treasures. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, create a 3/1 red dinosaur creature token. You only get 1 of these a turn. Absolutely bananas, but very narrow, right? I will say that I guess if all of the creatures in your deck are every creature type, like in Changeling or something, or if you're playing the thing in Commander that does that, I can never remember the name of it. It was like a 4 mana artifact that makes all the creatures in your deck, all the creatures on the stack, all the creatures in play are like 1 creature type. This is pretty good with those. But even just in the Dinosaurs deck, I think it's halfway decent, especially again in Commander, it's great. But in a standard Dinosaurs deck, do you really want to drop Belligerent, whatever it is, on turn 2 and then give it no creatures power to copy on turn 3? In an aggressive deck, do you really want to spend turn 3 doing this and literally nothing else? I don't think so, but there's definitely playability on the card. In a long game, it's really good. So I'm going to give this 2.75. I want to go a 1/4 point up, but I'm not going to. It's just too narrow. Rampaging Ceratops is 5 mana for a 5/4 that can't be blocked by 3 or more dudes. Super Menace, 1.25. Rumbling Rock Slide. It's 4 mana. It deals damage equal to the number of lands you control to target creature at sorcery speed. That's bad, man. What do we have? Spitting Earth in like Mirage block or something like that? It was 2 mana for and I think it was instant, but it may have been a sorcery. Now that I think about it, I think it was a sorcery, but yeah. It dealt damage equal to a creature equal to the number of mountains you control. Apparently, it doubles the cost of the spell if you want to just put in lands instead of mountains in that text box. That's just not good, man. Even as a removal spell, it could be... Boy, that could be better. So, I'm going to give this a 1.5. Saheeli's Lattice is 2 mana. 1 and a red for an artifact. When it ETBs, you can discard a card if you do draw 2 cards. It is Tormenting Voice. What is the gravy? 5 mana to craft it with 1 or more dinosaurs, and then you get Mastercraft Raptor. 4 toughness, but its power is equal to the power of the exiled cards used to craft it. So it can be a 15-4, you know, but it doesn't even have trample. Like, I don't know. At least it's Tormenting Voice on the floor, and then on the ceiling, it's huge, theoretically. And it can be all the dinosaurs in your graveyard. Right? So even if you don't have any dinosaurs in play, just craft it. You know, after the sweeper, oh, you put all my dinosaurs in the yard? Cool, I'll craft it up, and it's a 12 power guy. You know, you got to deal with that now. So, I don't know. Maybe it's better than I want it to be, but still. I'm just going to give this a 2 and move on. Scytheclaw Raptor is 3 mana, 2 and a red for a 4/3 dino. When a player casts a spell, if it's not their turn, Scytheclaw Raptor deals 4 to them. Awesome. Awesome, playable standard card, 3-drop in a bunch of mono red decks from here to eternity. It's so good. It's so good. Turns Wandering Emperor into a much worse card. Just, oh my goodness. Even if they let this resolve and they want to remove anything on your turn, including it, that's going to cost you 4 life, kid. That's going to cost you a Boros Charm worth of damage. That's so good, dude. This card is great. I'm going to give it a 3. A little narrow because it really only goes in the mono red decks. Although, is this a Commander playable card too? Just keep people honest in Commander, you know? I should give it higher. This is a 3.25. There's been a lot of really good cards today that have gotten a 3.25. This is up there. I'll give it a 3 though. It's just a solid 3. Yeah, this is an uncommon. How's that possible? Seismic Monstersaur is 6 mana for a 6/5 trample. It has mountain cycling too, and you can pay 2 and a red, sack a land, and draw a card. This is my favorite of all the land cycling things in the entire set. And I'm going to bump it up to a 2 here, even though it doesn't deserve a 2. But I do think that 2 red, sack a land, draw a card is just a halfway powerful line of text to have on a card. Probably won't do like commander work or anything, but again, compared to all of these other cards that we've seen with like a land cycling ability in this set, I think this is far and away the best of them. Sack a land, draw a card is halfway decent, especially when you don't even have to do it like at only sorcery speed. You know, you can do it EOT or whatever. So I think it's kind of good. Sunfire Torch is next. A single red mana for an artifact. It's an equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+0. Has whenever this creature attacks, you may sacrifice Torch. When you do, the creature deals 2 damage to a target. It equips for 1. This is actually kind of neat, but not great. I'll give this a 2 as well and just kind of move on, and that's probably too high. 1.75. Sunshot Militia, awesome. 2 mana, 1 and a red for a 1/3 human soldier. Tap 2 untapped artifacts and or creatures you control to have Militia deal a damage to each opponent. Activate only as a sorcery. Super cool, man. I don't know how great it is in standard, especially with the sorcery speed. You have to bring down all of your shields to actually use this guy, and that kind of sucks, but I don't know, man. There's definitely something there, especially in EDH, where I think this is halfway decent, even though it has to do way more damage to actually kill somebody. You know, they have twice their life total. But I think in a game of, standard or something, this could easily bolt them before they know what's going on, and then they'll bolt them again the next turn. Turn after that, it'll deal 4, It's not hard to have a bunch of artifacts out, dude. And you can tap your creatures, too, for what it's worth. The fact that it get 2 different permanent types to tap with this thing, I think it's actually like halfway dangerous and can finish a game off some of the time, but it's not very aggressive to play on turn 2 or anything. So I don't think the card is incredible, but I do think there is definitely something there with this ability. Again, how open-ended it is kind of scares me. It can deal 5 damage if you're doing playing the game right. Works well with Halo Fountain too. Always looking for cards that work well with Halo Fountain. I'm going to give this a 2.25. 2.25. Let's go with that. Tectonic Hazard is a single red mana for a sorcery that basically is in the festivities that doesn't, I don't think it, does in the festivities deal damage to planeswalkers? Because if it does, this does not do that. But it is, aside from that, it's in the festivities. And so it's good. What would I give in the festivities that doesn't deal damage to planeswalkers? 2. I'll give it a 2. Triumphant Chomp is a single red mana for a sorcery with a great name. It deals 2 damage to target creature, or excuse me, let me move back. It deals damage to target creature equal to 2, or the greatest power among dinosaurs you control, whichever is greater. Very narrow removal spell for the dinosaurs deck, but good in that deck. I'll give it a 2. Trumpeting Carnosaur. Should I give it a 2.25? Let's give it a 2.25. Trumpeting Carnosaur is up next. This is 6 mana for a 7/6 trample when an ETBs discover 5. But you can pay 2 in a red and discard it from your hand, and it deals 3 damage to a creature or a planeswalker. This card is bonkers, dude. I love this. I love this as a reanimation target. It's like a baby Itali, you know? But what Itali can't do is discard itself and be a removal spell. I love this card so much, dude. I love this card so much. I really do. I don't know if it's great because it does cost 6 mana, and yeah, 3 damage. That's 3 mana is not the going rate for 3 damage, right? But the fact that if you rip it off the top of your library late in the game, it's a huge dude that gives you more stuff too. It gives you Discover 5. It tramples too, so they have to deal with it, and they have to deal with whatever it makes too, for that matter, because you Discover 5. But if you rip it early and you're like in a tight situation, 3 damage, you know, it's like, I don't know if it's one of the better cards in the set or not, but it's one of my favorite cards in the set, and I am giving this a 3. Solid. Just a solid 3. Doesn't need to be any more or less than that, but I do think it deserves a 3. Volatile Wanderglyph is 2 mana, 1 in a red for a 2/2. When it becomes tapped, discard a card. If you do, draw a card. This is a May ability. 1.25. Yeah. Zoyowa's Justice, 2 mana for an instant. The owner of an artifact or creature with mana value 1 or greater shuffles it into their library. Then that player discovers X, where X is its mana value. So still looks up there with Chaos Warp in terms of how good it is. It's really good. Really, really good red removal spell, especially for Commander. But even outside of Commander, it's kind of fine, you know. A little chaotic, but that's what you want. 2.5. And that's at least 2.5, dude. This is a fine red piece of removal. Fine red piece of removal. Armored Kincaller is a 3 mana 3/3 dino. When it ETBs, reveal a dinosaur from your hand if you want to. If you do, or you control another dinosaur, gain 3. So it's just always going to gain you 3 in your dinosaur's deck. And it goes in the sideboard against mono red and stuff. Let's just give it a 2. Let's just give it a 2. Basking Capybara is the 2 mana 1/3. If you've descended 4, it's a 4/3. It's fine. Let's give it a 2 as well, but it only gets that because it's a Capybara. Bedrock Tortoise is 4 mana for a 0/6. As long as it's your turn, dudes you control have hexproof. Each creature you control with toughness greater than its power assigns the combat damage with the toughness. It's one of these things. 4 mana 6/6. All your guys have hexproof on your turn. Trying to make green more playable, but there's no other real keyword abilities on it or anything. So it is 4 mana. If it was 3 mana, we'd be talking, right? That's the kind of Magic we're playing now. If this were Pugnacious Hammerskull and it was a 3 mana 6/6, we would be talking. But 4 mana 6/6, kind of. And then pseudo hexproof for all your dudes. That's a lot of good stuff, baby. It is. And if you do resolve this, I like this. If you resolve this, your guys have hexproofs. They have to wait for their turn to spend mana to use the removal spells. That can throw them off too. So just the resolution can help a lot on a card like this. So I do like it. I'm going to give it a 2.5. Sure. Yes. Cavern Stomper is next. 6 mana for a 7/7 when it ETBs. Scry 2. You can also pay 4 mana and it can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less this turn. It's not very good. 6 mana 7/7. You know, it's much better than a Crawl Worm. And I would score Crawl Worm a 1.5 for old time's sake. I will give this a 1.5 though. Decent ETB trigger. Not the absolute worst, you know, mana cost to power weight ratio or anything. And it's got an activated ability. So 1.5. Cenote Scout, I should say, is a single mana for a 1/1 when it ETBs, it explores. We did it, baby. We did it. We got the creature we wanted. So it's a 1/1 draw a card or a 1 mana 2/2. Awesome. Awesome. Awesome no matter what. Really, really good card here. I'm telling you. It obviously has a ceiling. You can't score it too high. It's not like a 3.5, but I'm going to go ahead and give this little guy a 2.75. All by itself. It could be as much as a 3. I'm telling you. It's either a 1 mana 2/2 or a 1 mana draw a card. 1 mana guy draw. It's so good. Both of those modes are fantastic. So 3, you know, it's 2.75 is probably where I want to be though with this. It's a very, it's a good card, dude. It's a good card. Coati Scavenger is 3 mana for a 3/2 raccoon. Has Descend 4. As long as you got 4 permanents in your yard, return target permanent from your graveyard to your hand when it ETBs. So not really like Eternal Witness or anything, but it's trying. It's trying its absolute best. We're getting some cool creature types in this set. Capybara and raccoon and stuff. I like it. But altogether, I'm not going to give this more than a 2. Right at a solid 2. Colossadactyl. 4 mana, 4/5 reach trample. Good stats, dude. I feel like 10 years ago, this would have been a standard playable guy, but he's just kind of not anymore. Great flavor text, but I'm just going to give this a 1.75, and it hurts my heart to have to do that. Because even like 5 or 6 years ago, like the original Ixalan came out, I would have been like, this is great. I actually think we had a creature a lot like this in the original Ixalan, and it wasn't as good as any of us thought it was going to be. Because we still had old school Magic brain, you know. Cosmium Confluence is 5 mana, 4 and a green for a source. Choose 3. You can choose the same mode more than once. Search your library for a cave, put it on the battlefield, tap, shuffle up. Put 3 +1/+1 counters on a cave. It becomes a 0/0 elemental with haste, still a land, or destroy target enchantment. So a neat little piece for the cave decks again, you know. For 5 mana, you can ramp 3. For 5 mana, you can ramp 3. That's just good. That baseline is very good. But also late in the game, maybe after you've cast Sunfall, next turn, you can cast this and swing 9 damage. Okay. So, card has some uses, man. I like this an awful lot. And just the fact that it's 5 mana ramp 3, I think it sees play in standard maybe for no other reason than that. So, has to be better than the ramp stuff we've already seen. And I'm not sure that is because we're trying to ramp to 7. And, you know, Invasion of Zendikar. You know, it's 4 mana, ramps 2. That's 6 lands, drop a land, 7 mana. Right? Whereas this, 5 mana, ramp 3, that's 8 right there. Drop a land, 9. What are you doing? Portal of Phyrexia? You know? It basically guarantees that you do get your attacks the next turn, like no matter what, though. And sometimes, you know, Invasion doesn't even do that because you might not draw a land. So, but still, I'm not sure about it, but 5 mana, man, 5 mana ramp 3. And it's a win condition, and it destroys enchantments. Yeah, dude. Let's just throw... Oh, it's hard. That's so hard, dude. Let's throw a 2.75 at this. I think it's that good. Disturbed Slumber is 2 mana for an instant. Till end of turn, a land you control becomes 4/4 dino with reach and haste. Still a land must be blocked this turn if able for some reason. 1.25. I just don't like cards like this. Earthshaker Dreadmaw is next. Not a colossal Dreadmaw, but he does shake the earth. 6 mana, 6/6 tramps. When he ETBs, draw a card for each other dinosaur you control. Kind of gross. This might be in the sideboard of the dinosaurs deck, but I'm pretty sure you want to kill them by the time you get to a card like this. Or you want it to have haste or something. So I don't know. But that is a great line of text. Goes in every dinosaur commander deck from now to the end of time. So I will actually give this like a somewhere between a 2 and a 2 1/4, you know, like a 2.15, something like that. Explorer's Cache is 2 mana, 1 and a green for an artifact. ETBs with 2 +1/+1 counters. Whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on the cache. You can also tap the cache and move a +1/+1 counter from the cache onto a creature as a sorcery. Big gimmicks here, big fun stuff. Your guys die and some of their power stays on the table. That's pretty decent, but I don't really love this. 1.75. Galta, the Stampede Tyrant, 8 manners for a 12/12 Elder Dino with Trample. When he ETBs, put any number of creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. That's so good, dude. It's so dumb. You can reanimate this. Throw your Atraxa down. You can ramp into this. Throw your Atraxa down. I just said, what are you getting to 8 mana for? It's probably this, right? It's pretty good. You do have to have other creature cards in your hand, which means that you've been holding for the entirety of the game. You've been holding on to this and a Titan of Industry and like another 6 mana guy. That seems bad, right? You don't really... It's turn 1. You don't want to have like 3 7 mana guys in your hand. But this does at least sort of mitigate that. If you can get this into play, all your dudes come out. So pretty sick. It's a 12/12 trample. They got to beat that. But even if they can beat that, they got to beat everything else it threw into play. So cool card. Probably see some Reanimator play or something like that. Maybe some ramp play too, but just as like a one of. You don't play 4 of this. You don't play 3 of this. So I'm not super convinced on it, but I am going to give it a solid 2.75. Almost a 3, but a little Timmy-ish to be honest. Glimpse the Core is 2 mana, 1 and a green for a source. Choose 1, search your library for a basic forest, put it on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle, or return a cave card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Awesome. Rampant growth in standard. Never thought we'd get it ever again, but here it is. It doesn't search for any basic like rampant growth does, but still, I mean, a 2 mana land ramp in standard that can also get caves too, by the way. It's just kind of nasty. So 2.5, which just goes to show you that 2.5 can be a very, very playable card, right? So 2.5. I want to give it more, but I'm not. Glowclap Lantern is a single green mana for an artifact. It is an equipment. Equipped creature has, you may look at the top card of your library anytime, and whenever this creature attacks, it explores. It also has equip 2, which is just too much. This is almost like draw a card whenever the creature attacks, or whenever it attacks, put a +1/+1 counter. It's a little mix between both of those. And it lets you look at the top card of your library. So you know which one's going to happen when you attack. That, takes some of the guesswork out of attacking. Like, oh, I'd really like this guy to get a counter. Oh, I drew a card, my guy dies. Okay. At least I drew a card, I guess. Still, this is less than fine. I'll give it a 1.25. Growing Rights got reprinted. The 3 mana legendary enchantment. When it ETBs, look at the top 4. You may reveal a creature, put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 4 or more guys, it transforms into a Cradle of the Sun. Taps for green, or it taps for guys Cradle, which is pretty amazing. So it wasn't great last time it was in standard. It only saw a little bit of play every now and again, but to my understanding, this sees like Pioneer play from time to time currently. So good reprint. It's obviously busted if you can get it to flip over and you actually have dudes in play, but that is easier said than done. But I just got to give Growing Rights a 3. And I really want to give it more than that, to be honest with you. But it doesn't do a whole lot when it comes into play. And, it wants to be in a deck that plays a bunch of creatures, but on your turn 3, you have to skip playing creatures to play Growing Rights. So it's, it's not very conducive to itself, but it's obviously still a good card. Sought after in Commander for a reason. Watley, Poet of Unity is 3 mana, 2 and a green for a 2/3 legendary human warrior bard. When Poet of Unity enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then shuffle. You can also pay 5 mana, that is 3 and 2 Boros hybrids, to exile Watley, return it to the battlefield transformed as a sorcery. You get Roar of the Fifth People. On Chapter 1, this creates 2 3/3 dinos. On Chapter 2, Roar of the Fifth People gains creatures you control, have tap, add Naya colors. On Chapter 3, search the library for a dino, put it in your hand, shuffle. And on Chapter 4, dinos you control gain double strike and trample till end of turn. So, nuts card. In specifically, I think the Dinosaur Commander deck. I don't know if this is actually like amazing in standard in the Dinosaurs deck, but it might just be good in Naya. Like a Naya deck that doesn't play all the dinosaurs in the world. Like it doesn't have to play Belligerent, whatever it is, Yearling, because it doesn't play that many dinosaurs. But instead it plays cards like Watley and gets them flipped over, creates the dinosaurs, ramps with the second chapter, goes and gets one big important dinosaur on Chapter 3, so I don't even know this has to be in Dinosaurs in Standard. I just think that it does so much on one card that it's pretty decent. I can't really give it more than like a 2.5 because I think the application is still somewhat narrow. Not as narrow as some like creature type specific cards we've seen in the set so far, but application is still fairly narrow. You might get blown out, right? You exile as a sorcery and transform it. But the ETB value is there, and if you ever do get the Saga part of it, it's creating so much value for you. So I think it's good. I think it's kind of good, but I'm just going to give it a 2.75 or 2.5. 2.75, sure. Whatley's Final Strike is a bite effect for 3 mana, and the creature gets +1/+0. Yeah, 1.5, something like that. I like bite effects, though. Hulking Raptor is 4 mana for a 5/3 ward 2. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you get 2 green mana. This guy's great. This guy's so good. You know, if your opponent does want to take him out, it's usually going to cost their whole turn to do it on curve, which feels pretty good, especially if you already have a couple of dinosaurs in play smacking them in the face, you know? So, seems okay. Seems okay, especially if you are ramping into huge stuff. Like, this does take you from 4 to 6 in the dinosaurs deck. And that is a very important number to hit if you want the guy that draws a card for all your dinosaurs, or, you know, the 7/5 discover, or 7/6 trample discover 5 when he ETBs that guy. Like, this will help you get to those dudes really fast. So that's kind of cool, especially considering dinosaurs has a Birds of Paradise. We're going to hit that guy soon too. So you get this guy turn 3 and then like turn 4, you know, hit the 7/6 trample discover 5, or like hit the guy that draws you 3 cards when he comes into play. Like, yeah, okay. Seems all right. So this guy's cool, and your opponent's prioritized to kill him, but it makes he's a little harder to kill. You know, I'm gonna throw a 3.25 at this dude. I'm really gonna do that. The more I look at him, the more I just talk myself into him, dude. I think a 3.25 is right because this guy is as good as he looks. I think you have a propensity to look at cards like this and you're like, oh, that's not as good as it looks. In this case, I think it actually is. So yeah. I'll move on to In the Presence of Ages. 3 mana for an instant. Reveal the top 4 of your library. Put a creature and or a land card from among them into your hand. Rest into your yard. So again, a 3 mana draw too that reminds me of Legends of the Hidden Temple. That is the exact face from Nickelodeon's Legends of the Hidden Temple when I was a kid. Anyway, sorry for that flashback there. But yeah, draw 2. The rest go in your yard. Pretty D's. I want to call this worse than Grizzly Salvage. But Grizzly Salvage only ever puts 1 card into your hand. This can put 2 cards in your hand. That's good. But I still don't think it's quite going anywhere. I'm just going to give this a 1.75. Intrepid Paleontologist is 2 mana, 1 and a green for a 2/2 human druid. Tap to add a mana of any color. Or pay 2 mana to exile a card from a graveyard. You may cast dinosaur creature spells from among cards you own in exile with Intrepid Paleontologist. If you cast a spell this way, that creature enters the battlefield with a finality counter on it. Now, somebody in the chat has just asked, what format is this set in? This is a standard legal set, but when you see cards like this, with all of this text, with this weird ability, I can see how you'd think this is a commander set, but this is a good card. You know, just 2 mana, Dork taps for mana of any color that can also play around in graveyards. You can mess around with their graveyard too, take away their reanimation plan, their tenacious underdogs. Or you can just recast dinosaurs after a sweeper, which is also kind of bonkers, dude. So this is a great little 2 mana Dork, but I'm not going to score him more than about a 2.5. You know, role player. And that's about all he is. But a very, 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 very good one that is better than your average Dork. Maybe I should give him a 2.75 because there's not a whole lot of Dorks that can also play in the graveyards. But right now, Armored Scrap Gorger is a better... You know, he does both of those things in standard. You don't have to pay mana to mess around in graveyards with Scrap Gorger, so he's just better. You know, all things considered. But it's still a very good card, and Dorks like this, I just like to throw a 2.5 at because I like dudes that tap for any color. But he does more, and that's even better. Ixalan's Lorekeeper is a single green mana for a 1/1 human druid. Tap it for a mana of any color, but only cast dinosaurs or activate dinosaurs. Pretty sweet, actually. I mean, it's a Birds of Paradise, but for dinosaurs. So narrow as it is, I'm giving it a 2.5. Jade Heart Attendant is not correct. Yeah, it's Jade Seedstones is the next card. 4 mana for an artifact. When it ETBs, distribute 3 +1/+1 counters among 1, 2, or 3 creatures you control. Craft with Creature for 7 mana. You get a 7/7. When it ETBs, you gain life equal to the mana value of the exiled card that you crafted. Kind of not great. Honestly, I don't really like either mode on this, although a 7/7 that gains you like 4 life, you know, could be great in certain games of limited, but Let's just give it a 1.25. I don't love this thing. Jade Light Spelunker. Whew, this is a green and X for a 1/1 Merfolk Scout. When it ETBs, it explores X times. Okay, so I want this to be fine. It's kind of just Jade Light Ranger. You know, if you pay 3 mana for it, it's kind of Jade Light Ranger. But I think Jade Light Ranger had an extra point of power to begin with, which is going to make a huge difference. I want to like this so bad. I really like the scalability on it. You know, if you rip it on turn 6 and pay, 7 mana for it, you get a 5/5 and you draw 2 or something. It seems okay. Like, I don't put this past C in play, especially in Commander, but I don't put it past C in play in Standard if anybody ever plays green again in their lives. So I don't know. I guess Golgari is a thing right now, but this does not go in Golgari. It doesn't really go in the Merfolk deck. It might go in the Explore deck because, like, there's a Simic guy. Whenever a creature you control explores, you can, like, ramp and stuff like that. And he gets +1/+1 counters. There's a couple of things, like, whenever you explore, do a thing. And this guy works really well with those. Like, he works well with Wild Growth Walker from the last time we were in Ixalan, right? So he has some cool, like, explore synergies, and that's probably where he shines the most. But just for the scalability, I'm going to give this guy a 2.5, at least. Again, at least, dude. This guy's at least a 2.5. Could easily be more. Keslim Stone Tree is up next. This is 3 mana for an artifact. When it ETBs, look at the top 6 of your library. Put a land card from among them on the battlefield tapped. Rest go on bottom. You can craft with a cave for 6 mana, and you get... I went the wrong way. You get Keslim Strider. It's just a 5 mana. So 6 mana for a 5/5. But the good news about this is that it's just one of these 3 mana rampers. I actually cut a part of the preview video out where I went about for like 3 minutes comparing this to Topiary Stomper. You may notice if you watch the preview video with this entry that this entry is very fast. That's because I cut so much time out where I'm talking about like, well, let's compare it to Topiary Stomper. And like, I think Stomper is obviously the better card, but this puts any land. You only look at the top 6, but you put any land from among them. And I think that matters a great deal, but I'm just still going to stop this at like a 1.75. Malamet Battleglyph is a single green mana for a sorcery. Choose target creature you control and target creature you don't control. The creature you control entered the battlefield this turn. It gets a +1/+1 counter, and then those creatures fight each other. Not Blizzard Brawl, but like still a little bit better than like Prey Upon. So I'll give it a 1.75. Malamet Brawler is 2 mana for a 2/2 cat warrior. When he attacks, an attacking creature gains trample till end of turn. Probably better than it looks. Again, a 23rd creature in limited, but maybe better than a 23rd creature. We have said for ages that 2 mana 2/2s are not embarrassing to include in your limited deck. They're getting more and more embarrassing by the day, but this guy I think might be okay and could be like a sly little addition to like the Dinosaurs deck in limited, right? Trample is really, really good on big old guys, and this set's got a bunch of big guys. So I like this dude, not giving him more than a 1.5 though. Malamet Scythe is 3 mana, 2 and a green for an equipment with flash. When it ETBs, it attaches to a thing. Equipped creature gets +2/+2, or you can equip it for 4 mana. So once it falls off something, it is an awful lot to attach it to something else. But basically a combat trick equipment. Nothing wrong with those, but it is a little bit expensive and way too priced out of Standard. So I'll give this a 1.25. Malamet Veteran, 5 mana for a 5/4 tramps with Descend 4 if you got 4 guys or permanents in your yard. Then you put a +1/+1 counter on a creature when Veteran attacks. In limited, 5 mana, 5 power, trample guy can put more power on the board really easily because Descend 4 is easy to hit. So I kind of like it there. I'm just going to give this a 1.5. I think we'll go all the way there. Mine Shaft Spider is 4 mana, 3 and a green for a 3/4 reach. When it ETBs, you may mill 2 cards. Again, limited playable for the deck that wants to descend and stuff like that. Not really playable outside of that, although it is much strictly better than a giant spider. They throw that out there, but it's still not amazing. I'll just give it a 1.25. Nurturing Bristleback is 7 mana, 5 and 2 green for a 5/5. When it enters the battlefield, you get a 3/3 dino token, and it force cycles for 2. It's whatever. Let's just give it a 1.25 as well. Oyer Kaslim, the Deepest Growth, 5 mana for a 6/5 trample god, which is a legend. When it deals combat damage to a player, reveal that many cards from the top of your library. Put a creature and or land card from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. When it dies, return to the battlefield tapped and transformed to its Temple of Cultivation. You can tap it for a green, or you can pay 2 a green and tap it and transform it, but only if you have the city's blessing, only if you control 10 or more permanents. It's actually easier to hit than it looks, especially in the late game, because you're going to have like 7 lands out, right? So, later on, especially very late on in the game, it's possible that like all you have is lands and you can still transform this, right? And that's pretty good. It can put up to 2 things in play, a creature and or a land if it did at least 2 damage. And you hit a creature and a land, you can put both of them on the table. It's really good. Even if you whiff, quote unquote whiff, and you hit like 3 lands because you did 3 combat damage, you still get to put a land on the table. You still get to ramp. It's cool. He does have to wait to attack and all that stuff, but I don't know. I do think he's like at least solid, if nothing else. So I'll give the guy a 2.75. Over the Edge is 2 mana, 1 and a green for a sorcery, destroy target artifact or enchantment, or a creature you control explores twice. It's fine. Fine card. 1.75, somewhere in there. Pathfinding Axe Maw or Axe Jaw is 4 mana, 3 and a green for a 4/3. When it ETBs, it explores. Who cares? 1. Poison Dart Frog. Here's my boy, Poison Dart Frog. 2 mana, 1 and a green for a 1/1 frog with reach. Taps for a mana of any color, or you can pay 2 to have it gain Death Touch till end of turn. I was just saying, I like basically any 2 mana taps for any color dork. But this guy can take out virtually any creature in the game of Magic, right? He can reach and gain Death Touch. What a good dude. I like these dorks that have some sort of relevance in the game well after they're done ramping. This guy does that. I think he's probably only limited playable, although a copy of this guy is going directly into one of my cubes. This guy seems so cubable, dude. Like they made him 4 cube. I'm serious. But one way or the other, great card and limited and all that, but I can't really score him more than a 1.75. No, I can't. I can give this guy a 2. I can give this guy a 2. I think the other dork we looked at that's dinosaur specific, sort of, and like messes around in graveyards, I think it's just better than this. But that said, it's still a dork that taps for any color and can take anything out. So at least a 2, dude. At least a 2. Pugnacious Hammerskull. Here's the 3 mana 6/6. When if it attacks while you don't control another dinosaur, put a stun counter on it. How much do you give a giant pile of stats? A 2.75, because this has so much to do. With Belligerent Yearling, we already went over that earlier. It's great with fight rigging. There's a couple of great cards with fight rigging in this set. This is one of them. So a lot for this thing to do. It's not as narrow as it looks, but of course it doesn't look that narrow. It looks like it's just dinosaur decks and nothing else, but you really look at it, it's a 3 mana 6/6. It goes in every green deck. So yeah, it's good. So 2.75. River Herald Guide is 3 mana, 2 and a green for a 3/1 vigilance. When it ETBs, it explores. It's not good. 1.25. Seeker of Sunlight is green mana for a 1/1. You can pay 2 and a green, and it explores. Okay. Open-ended. You can do it a bunch of times. You got infinite mana in Commander. Draw all your lands, and he becomes a 40/40. It's still not that good, though, is it? You know what I mean? It's a 1.25. Sentinel of the Nameless City. This is just one more thing, though, on this guy. Pretty decent mana sink to have in limited. That's all I'm going to say. Sentinel of the Nameless City is 3 mana, 2 and a green for a 3/4 vigilance. And when he enters the battlefield or attacks, you get a map token. Good value, good ETB value, decent stats, kind of, for the mana value. Vigilance is good in Wandering Emperor formats and all that. And after a few turns, if you can figure out what to do with all this value, it's a lot of value. ETBs, token. Attacks, token. That's, again, you can parlay that into something real somehow, I'm sure. But I'm just going to give this like a 2.5. It's not a tireless tracker or anything. The Skullspore Nexus, 8 mana, but not really, because it's a legendary artifact that costs X less to cast. X is the greatest power among creatures you control, Great Henge style. Whenever one or more non-token creatures you control die, you get a green fungus dinosaur creature token with base power and toughness equal to the total power of those creatures. And of course, you can pay 2 and tap it to double a creature's power till end of turn. So if they target a guy with a removal spell, you can double its power. That guy dies, and you get a token with double its power. You can play this. relatively early in the game. It cost 8 mana, but if you play like Pugnacious Hammerskull on turn 3, that's another thing that card does. Play Pugnacious Hammerskull on turn 3, then this costs 2 mana on turn 4. You can do other stuff. It's pretty good, dude. So I think this card is a little bit great. It always has this activated ability. Like, it doesn't do much unless your guys die, right? Unless your guys are dying, it's really not doing much. Was it worth casting? Yes, because double the creature's power till end of turn is unbelievable. So I think it's probably worth like a 2 of if mono green like big boys is a deck or whatever. So I'm going to give this a 3, and Commander is doing an awful lot for that. Commander's doing so much for that score, but it's playable in Standard and will see play, so I'm kind of surprised that I didn't give it more than a 3, but I think that it's narrow enough that a 3 is about where I want to sit with it. Spelunking is 3 mana, 2 and a green for an enchantment. Whenever Spelunking enters the battlefield, draw a card. Then you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. If you put a cave onto the battlefield this way, you gain 4 life. Land you control, enter the battlefield untapped. What a good 3-drop for the cave decks, and it doesn't even have to be in the cave decks. Let me throw that out there. It's draw a card and ramp. 3 mana draw a card and ramp is like Growth Spiral. That's pretty good. But in the caves deck, this is going to really give you a chance against aggro because all your lands are going to come into play. Most of your lands are going to come into play tapped for the first few turns of the game. And so aggro would run you over otherwise. There's obviously ways you engineer like a tapped land on turn 1, untapped cave on turn 2, blow that guy up. But you're playing a lot of tapped lands in that deck. So this gives you a chance by gaining you the 4 life, ramping you a little bit. Drawing a card is always good too. It's just card does everything you want to do. And then all of everything you play, triomes, caves, whatever, interplay untapped. So even again, in a not cave deck, I could see like Domain, the 5-color Atraxa deck playing this because it plays 20 triomes and it wants them to interplay untapped. And this is a ramp spell. It's not Topiary Stomper, but it is a ramp spell that draws a card and makes it sure they can play on curve every turn. Like the turn they need to play their Atraxa, they get their 7th land. That land ain't going to be tapped. They're not going to lose to tapped land anymore if they play this. So it's actually a big game for those decks too. I'm going to give this card a 3. Yeah. Look at me doing it. This card gets a 3. Probably should get a 2.5. I know that. I'm giving it a 3. I think draw a card, ramp a thing is Growth Spiral is a really good card, dude. That's all. I know it's 3 mana. It's not instant speed like Growth Spiral. I'm fully aware of these things, but it's just a really good card, man. That is a good card, and I will actually give it a 2.75. I'll dip it 1/4 of a point, but I think 2.75. Card is good. The card is good. Make no mistake. Staggering Size is 2 mana, 1 and a green. For an instant, a creature gets +3/+3, gains trample. So a lot of trample in this set. That's good on all these big boys. Break through pretty easily unlimited, but I can't give this more than a 1, really. Tendril of the Micro Tyrant is 2 mana, 1 and a green. For a 2/2 fungus wizard. Pay 7 mana to put 7 +1/+1 counters on a non-creature land you control. It's still a land. 1.25. Thrashing Brontodon. What do you give Thrashy B, everybody? 3 mana, 3/4. Pay 1, sack it to destroy an artifact or enchantment. A very, very good magic card indeed. 2.75. You give Thrashy B, you respect Thrashing Brontodon, and you give it a 2.75. That's what you do. A Twists and Turns is a single green mana for an enchantment. If a creature you control would explore, instead scry 1 and then explore. When Twists and Turns enters the battlefield, target creature you control explores. When a land enters the battlefield under your control, if you control 7 or more lands, transform it to Mycoid Maze. This is a land that taps for green. Or you can pay 3 and a green and tap it to look at the top 4, reveal a creature, put it into your hand, the rest go on bottom. Search for Iskanta, but for creatures. I'll stick to my guns here. I had people kind of push back on me when I said this in the spoiler video, but I mean it. I've searched my heart, and I mean it. This is good outside of decks that explore. If you play it on turn 1, I know it sits there and does nothing. I know that. Okay? But when you play your 7th land, which you will do because you're a ramp deck, then suddenly you get an extra land, an 8th mana you can tap. And you get Search for Iskanta for creatures. That's good. I don't care if you've explored a single time in the game up to that point. once you hit 7 lands, which is the whole point of your deck, you get an extra land and, dig for the Atraxa. What do you want? What more do you want than that? So I like the ETB value too. I like how little it costs to get into play. I think this card is pretty good. I'm not going to make the same mistake I made with Search last time when a lot of it wasn't just me. A lot of us were like, it looks fine. I guess it's going to be okay in control decks. And it was like the best card in the set. I'm going to just throw a 3 at this card. Okay? Again, probably slightly too high. But I think this is probably better than most people are giving it credit for. I really do. Walk with the Ancestors is next. 5 mana, 4 and a green for a source. Return up to 1 target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. Discover 4. 5 mana is too much. 1. Abuelo. It's gold cards. Abuelo, Ancestral Echo. I have heard some people horribly mispronounce this card. Like, I've mispronounced a bunch of cards this season. So I am not one to talk, but I don't know where you have to be from. It's like, first of all, abuela, abuelo, grandmother, grandfather. It's a word they teach you in Spanish class. Did you not go to Spanish class? That's fine. Have you ever seen a movie where like a Spanish person had a grandparent? I don't know. It's abuela. It's a word everyone knows, I thought, but I guess not. I have heard some people pronounce this in a way that I assume they must be mispronouncing it on purpose for engagement. I'm done. I just don't understand how you could screw this name up that bad. Abuelo, Ancestral Echo is 3 mana, 1, a white and a blue for a 2/2 legendary spirit with flying and ward 2. 1 white, blue. Exile another target creature or artifact you control. Return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So Blink on a Stick. Is it good? Maybe. I think this is another like fun cubable card if you're looking for a thing in the Azorius slot in your cube. I think it's actually great there. They're thinking about cube. I swear to you, they're thinking about cube. In Commander, maybe in the 99. I mean, obviously this seems like a decent Commander because Blink on a Stick, but I think this is actually more of a 99 thing. In Standard, I highly doubt this is really where you want to be. Even with the ward, like protecting it to help make sure you can untap with it on your next turn and blink a thing. I'm still just not quite sure it's where it needs to be. 3 mana is so much, but again, Soul Cauldron. Why does everything have an activated ability in this set? It seems like, but still, Abuelo's okay. Seriously, like, who's in your friend group? If you don't know how to pronounce this word, get some friends from this culture because okay. Anyway, I have to be done saying that now. I've really wanted to get that out these last like 2 weeks. How can you not pronounce this word? But yeah, it's like a 2.5. all things considered, it's like a 2.5. Akawali, I'm not naming names. I didn't name names. I'm not naming names. But Akawali the Seething Tower. It's 3 mana, 1 a green and a black for a 3/3 legendary fungus with Descend 4 and Descend 8. If there are 4 permanents in your yard, it gets +2/+2 and has Trample. 5/5 Trample for 3 mana if you've got Descend 4. If you've got Descend 8, it gets an additional +2/+2 and can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. So if you have Descend 8, it's a 7/7 Trample and 1 guy and no more than 1 guy has to step in front of it each combat. So it's probably going to trample over. See how that works? I think this is good, man. I keep thinking about it. And you know what I said back during previous season, how the Lurgoyf deck needs to find a way to get Trample onto its guys. Because Lurgoyf doesn't have it, Somnophage doesn't have it, Stickfingers doesn't have it, Souls of the Lost doesn't have it. You need Trample on your dudes. This guy just has baked in Trample. That's really good in this deck. Like really, really good. So it's a freaking Lovestruck beast. It's a 3 mana 5/5 with Trample that doesn't have to have like a 1/1 around for it to swing either. It's like, I don't know, dude. I like this card, but I'm not going to score it too high. You do have to do some work to get it where you want it to be, but not that much, man. Descend 4, it's a 3 mana 5/5 Tramp. Good, that's good. So I'm going to go 2.5, and that is a baseline score, man. But Amalia Benavides Aguirre next. See, I'm screwing words up too. I know I didn't do that right. It's probably just Aguirre, but that makes me think that that's that's actually just my English brain making it Aguirre, and it's not. But anyway, it's 2 mana, a white and a black for a 2/2 legendary vampire scout with ward pay 3 life. Whenever you gain life, Amalia explores, then destroy all other creatures if its power is exactly 20. I have heard people call this a strictly better. That's where I get like a little eye twitch. I've heard people call this a strictly better Ajani's Pride Mate. It isn't. It isn't. It's harder to cast than Pride Mate. It doesn't always get a +1/+1 counter when you explore, you know. You can't count on it. Like you can't say like, oh, I'll block with it and then gain life at instant speed to make sure that it gets a counter and blows you out in combat. Like you can't guarantee that with this card. It is not strictly, we use the word strictly better for a reason. It's not, but it is up there with Pride Mate. It obviously goes in Modern Soul Sisters, but does it go in Modern Soul Sisters? I don't know if it does. I really don't, man. Is it good enough? Is it just a one-up in Soul Sisters? I will say it's another life game payoff. I already said I wanted more of those. A 2 mana 2/2 ward pay 3 life is kind of good. It's just kind of good a little bit just by itself. But I imagine there's going to be a lot of boards where like Graveyard Trespasser comes down on your opponent's side of the table, completely blanks this thing for a few turns, you know? And like it just sits there, you know? You just think like, oh, it's ward pay 3 life. So that's good. It's going to attack. And if they want to remove it, then they have to pay 3 life. And yeah, theoretically, but also they could just block it with a creature bigger than it, which isn't that hard for the first few turns it's in play. So I don't know. I really want to like this card like a lot. I love Soul Sisters. I love vampires. I like Orzhov. I like everything the card does. I like life gain, payoff. But, you know, at the end of the day, I'm trying to look at all these cards objectively for competitive play, and I'm just not sure this is really there. So 2.5 at the absolute most. Absolute most. Aguirre, is that correct? Amalia Benavides Aguirre. Thank you. That sounds right. The Ancient One is 2 mana. Black and a blue for an 8/8 legendary spirit god with descend 8. It can't attack or block unless you have 8 permanents in your yard. But you can pay 2, a black and a blue, draw a card, discard a card. When you discard a card this way, target player mills cards equal to its mana value. Pretty sweet, actually, in terms of activated abilities, because you get to draw a discard. Also, Soul Cauldron exists. I'm going to say that with every card in the set, because they all have activated abilities. Magic gets more complicated by the day. This also looks like it goes in the Lurgoyf's pile, right? But I think it's better in fight rigging than it is in the Lurgoyf's pile by a lot. So try it in fight rigging. It's the only thing in standard I can think of at the moment that you play like this on turn 2, fight rigging 3, play your Atraxa on 3. So it's, if nothing else, it might see play for that reason, right? But I can't really score it that high. These are narrow applications, narrow decks, you know. It's not even good enough for Lurgoyfs. It's like the only deck it really goes in is fight rigging that I can think of off the top of my head. So I'll give it like a 2.5 at the absolute most. Caps out at 2.5. Anim Pakal, Thousandth Moon. It's not Krinko. It's not Adeline. It's its own thing. It's 3 mana, 1 in Boros colors for a 1/2 legendary human soldier. Whenever you attack with one or more non-gnomes, put a +1/+1 counter on him. Then create X 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature tokens that are tapped and attacking, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on Anim. So Krinko, they're not tapped and attacking. I think that's better. But they are tapped and attacking on this. Krinko counts power. That's better. This counts +1/+1 counters. You know something I didn't say the other day in the spoiler video when I was talking about this card that I think might be really, really good with this? Angel Fire Ignition, right? Because you get an Anim Pakal down and then the next turn, doesn't matter. Let's say that turn you attack with something, she gets a +1/+1 counter, you get a gnome, right? So on turn 4, you Angel Fire Ignition. Suddenly, she's a 4 power, because remember, she got a counter last turn. Suddenly, she's 4 power. She's putting 3 gnomes into play, and she has what? Like, lifelink, indestructible, like all the things that that Ignition gives to you. I think this might be a beating with Angel Fire Ignition, dude, is all I'm trying to say. Just a good card all in all. Again, you're comparing cards to Krinko, that means they're probably okay. If you're comparing them to Adeline, they're really good. And I think Adeline's probably better than this, all things considered, but it's still right there in the Adeline deck. Goes well in sort of a humans pile. It also goes really nicely in like Naya humans with Halana and Elena, giving it counters, and then, right, because it's going to, Halana and Elena gives us at least 2, if not more, counters every turn, right? And then just something else has to attack, and you get all those gnomes. I'm just saying, this big board presence very quickly, and even it can get big with stuff like Homestead Courage, Halana and Elena, Angel Fire Ignition, flashing it back even. Like, it's a board in a box by itself a lot of the time. So I think this card's sweet, and I'm going to score it a 2.75, about as close to a 3 as it gets, honestly. Really, very good. Bartolome del Presidio, baby. This is my favorite creature in the set, as you might have guessed. A white and a black for a 2/1 legendary vamp knight. Sacrifice a creature or an artifact. It gets a +1/+1 counter. Free sacrifice outlet. Not just creatures, also artifacts. How fun is that in a set with like a format with map tokens, treasure tokens, food tokens, clue tokens, like blood tokens? Oh, so dude, I wish we had a real mana base for Mardu right now. I really do. You know, we can put one together. It's gonna cost you some life because you got a bunch of like pain lands and stuff. But man, I love the idea of like Epicure into this on turn 2, or also like this in the same deck as Blood Tithe Harvester, and like we could make it work, dude. We're gonna have to make it work. Those are all vampires too. Those are all vampires. But anyway. 2 mana, free sacrifice outlet, spread of permanent types, counters, not till end of turn. Dude is pushed. Dude is one of the most pushed aristocrat sacrifice outlets I have ever seen in my entire career. He might literally be the best aristocrat sacrifice outlet we've ever seen. I mean, like Carrion Feeder's good, Viscera Seer's really good too, these 1-drops, but this guy, you know? So I'm going to give this guy a 3.5. It might just be me talking because I like aristocrats, right? But I don't think it is. I think this guy really is that good. Aristocrats might ride again in Modern because of a piece like this, and I'm serious. Just everything you'd ever want out of an Nantuko Husk. And he's 1 mana less than Nantuko Husk. And he sacrifices more permanent types than Nantuko Husk. And he gets counters, whereas Husk is just once a turn. I would have taken Nantuko Husk, is my point. We got this. So... everyone got it. Modern, Pioneer, Explorer, Commander, everyone got this guy. Elisil Core and Commander got this guy. Like, ooh, he's good. 3.5, sure. Belligerent is up next. 4 mana, 2 a red and a blue for a 5/5 legendary vehicle. When it attacks, create a treasure token. Till end of turn, you may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play lands, cast spells from the top. So it's kind of draw a card. And you crew 3. I like this better than most people do. You know, earlier, the red vehicle that comes into play, shoot down that guy, get a treasure token, right? I like that guy. This, draw a card, get a treasure token, win an attack. So you do have to wait a whole turn for it to happen and whatever. But it's a reasonable cost to cast. It's a 4 mana 5/5. Crew 3 is not hard to get, especially in Grixis where you have like Graveyard Trespasser, Corpse Appraiser, you know, all these 3-power dudes. Also, for what it's worth, that new Bloodbraid Elf works with this guy nicely too, because, you know, he's got 3 power. He can crew this. He also discovered when he came into play, maybe he hits something that can crew this. If he dies, I just kind of like the way that goes. If you play Belligerent on turn 4 and then the new Bloodbraid Elf on 5, he can crew the guy and also get you extra value. So that's kind of neat. But yeah, a treasure token and effectively a drawn card, I think is very good. It's even better than a drawn card because, you know, you don't take damage from Sheoldred. They can't make you discard it. Like, it's protected on the top of your library. I think it's kind of nice. So I don't know. I can't score it too high, but I will give it a 2.5 because, you know, back in my day, we had Jizam Jin. 4 mana, 5/5. Deals a damage to you during your upkeep too. But that set the bar for 20 years plus. Juzam Jin set the bar. 4 mana 5/5s are typically good. They still often are. Right? Sorry for the cough, by the way. They still often are. This isn't just that, right? You have to crew it. It's not just a creature. You have to crew it, which sucks. But altogether, 4 mana 5/5. When it attacks, ramp, draw a card. Are we really at the point in Magic where that's not exciting anymore? That's just not good. There's no way that can be good. I think that could be very good, actually. So 2.5, definitely. Caparocti Sunborn. 4 mana, 2, a red, and a white for a 4/4 legendary human soldier. When it attacks, you may tap 2 untapped artifacts and or creatures you control. If you do, discover 3. So, okay, pretty bad, right? Because it has to wait to attack and all that. 1.25. Discover 3 every turn theoretically sounds good, but it's just not going to work that way. In practice, it will not work that way. 1.25. Captain Storm, Cosmium Raider, 2 mana, a blue and a red for a 2/2 legendary pirate. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target pirate you control. Really good with all the treasure running around in this set. Just with like Dockside Extortionist, this is unbelievable in Commander and stuff, right? But there is that. But I think in Pirates, this is probably the best looking card in the deck. That's like pirate specific, pirate payoff and all that. Card is really neat there. And obviously all these things we see that put like more than one artifact into play on the same card, like very good. So I like it. But it's obviously super narrow to pirates. And that's the problem with the Ixalan set, is that there's going to be a lot of like very narrow creature type specific cards. But this could easily be, just a beating when set up correctly. Also kind of like the way it works with Third Path Iconoclast, just throwing out there. You're casting spells, you're getting artifact tokens, you're putting counters on pirates, you're feeling good. Because, it can put the bonus on itself. You don't even have to have other pirates. So how specific is it actually to pirates? Is it actually just an artifact card that puts counters on itself? I don't know. Either way, I think it's got a lot of cool stuff it can do, but I'm just going to give it like a 2.25, right? Cool commander. Deep Fathom Echo is 4 mana, 2 in Simic colors for a 4/4 Merfolk Spirit. At the beginning of combat on your turn, it explores. Then you may have it become a copy of another creature you control till end of turn. What I do like about this, you might have a good enough 4-drop already, or a good enough 3-drop, and this copies it, and you're feeling good. Copies Graveyard Trespasser, that's kind of okay, but it explores. So it can be like a 4/4 Graveyard Trespasser. It can be bigger than a Graveyard Trespasser. It can be bigger than whatever it copied. And I think that's cool, but it can also draw cards. And whatever it copied can't draw cards either. So in terms of 4 mana clones, this is a good one, but I still don't think it sees too much standard play or anything. Just clones aren't as exciting as they used to be, are they? This is a 2 1/4, if I've ever seen one. Gishath, Sun's Avatar, a straight-up reprint. Just 8 mana for a 7/6 Vigilance, Trample, Haste. Yet another thing you might be trying to get to 8 mana for. Whenever Gishath deals combat damage to a player, reveal that many cards from the top of your library, put any number of dinosaur cards from among them onto the battlefield, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. If it has Haste and it has Trample, that's very good because it can technically put 1,000,000 cards in your hand when it comes into play. You know what doesn't have to attack or deal combat damage to put like 5 things in your hand? Atraxa. Atraxa is probably better than this. It's not dinosaur specific or anything. But it is Gishath, and we all love Gishath, and we all stand Gishath. I will have to give Gishath a 2.75, if only for the commander people, because they'll come for me otherwise. Itzkinth, Firstborn of Gishath, is 2 mana, red and a green for a 2/3 legendary dinosaur with haste. ETBs you may pay 2. When you do, a dinosaur you control deals damage equal to its power to another target creature. Of course, the dinosaurs deck has to play a critical mass of dinosaurs if it's going to even call itself a dinosaur deck. Doesn't have all the room in the world for removal. Well, this is a removal spell. That's also a 2/3 haste. That's pretty good. Sometimes this is going to come down on turn 4, blow something up, and get in with haste all on the same turn because it blows up your opponent's one good blocker or whatever. So it's definitely a good card. 2.5. 2.75. I'm serious. 2.75. Just being a 2 mana 2/3 haste at the baseline is good enough. Bard class. It works really well in Bard class decks and like Pioneer Historic and stuff. So that it's free in Bard class. Let's go. There are definitely reasons the card is playable. Kellen, Daring Traveler, is 2 mana, 1 and a white for a legendary human fairy scout. It's a 2/3, and it attacks. You reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card with mana value 3 or less, put it into your hand. Otherwise, you may put it into your yard. Journey On is the sorcery half of this. It's just 1 green for an adventure. Create X map tokens. X is 1 plus the number of opponents who controls an artifact. The card does not actually look very good, much like the last Kellen that we saw. It's like flagship, important guy. Make sure you pay attention to this guy in the story. Not a great card, but he's okay. He's okay. You at least get 1 map token with this adventure half. And if your opponent has like 1 single artifact out at all, then suddenly 1 mana for 2 map tokens is okay. That's really not bad. And then obviously a 2 mana 2/3, not the worst stats in the world. If it attacks, you can draw a guy with mana value 3 or less, That means that most of the things in your deck have to be guys with creature with mana value 3 or less for this to hit for this to hit a lot. And that sucks. And even if like most of your deck is guys with mana value 2 or 3 or less, you're going to hit a land a lot of the time too. So I don't know. None of this is embarrassing. None of this card is embarrassing. The floor is reasonably high on this. And the ceiling's even relatively high when you think about the journey on half of it, but that all depends on what your opponents do. And just altogether, I can't really give this more than a 2.25. It's never going to do all the stuff you want it to do. I really don't think so. But Kutzel Malamet Exemplar is up next. 3 mana, 1 green, white for a 3/3 legendary cat warrior. Your opponent can't cast spells during your turn. Whenever one or more creatures you control, each with power greater than its base power, deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So you have to have, +1/+1 counters on your guys. Whenever they deal combat damage, draw a card. That's pretty good in and of itself. I like that line of text. But I really want to drive home how good your opponent can't cast spells during your turn is. That was on Teferi for a while. That's so annoying. If you've never experienced this line of text, like playing against it, it's really, really aggravating to not be able to cast spells on their turn. If this resolves, you can't remove it that turn. You have to wait till your turn to remove it. Which is lame. So it sounds like it's not that big of a deal, but it's such a roadblock, dude. It's such a roadblock. So sometimes you'll draw cards off of this, but if nothing else, like if literally nothing else happens with this, you got a 3 mana 3/3 that locks them out of countering spells if you resolved it, removing your guys on your turn if you resolved it, playing Wandering Emperor on your turn if you resolved it. And that line of text is very valuable. Very valuable. Seen a lot of people poo-poo this card, and I kind of talked it up a little bit in spoiler season. There's people in the comments like, dude, that card sucks. This is a good line of text. This is a very good line of text. Don't know if it's good enough, but it's proven to be not just aggravating, but literally amazing in the past. So I'm going to give this a 2.5, which I was fully prepared to give this a 2, but that line of text, dude, that line of text is very good. I promise you. Master's Guide Mural is 5 mana, 3, a white and a blue for an artifact. When it ETBs, get a 4/4 white and blue Golem artifact creature token. You can craft for 7 mana with an artifact and get Master's Manufactory. You can tap it to create a 4/4 white and blue Golem artifact creature token. Activate only if Manufactory or another artifact entered the battlefield under your control. So as long as you're getting artifacts, you get a 4/4 every single turn, but it does cost 7 mana to flip it over. And it's basically just a 5 mana 4/4. Card is scuffed, 1.5. Molten Collapse is 2 mana. Oh, did I say that this was, have I said we've already been through the top 3 removal spells? It's because I forgot about Molten Collapse, the actual best removal spell on the set. A black and a red for a sorcery. Choose one. If you descended this turn, you can choose both instead. Destroy target creature or planeswalker. Destroy target non-creature, non-land permanent with mana value 1 or less. There's so many things in Modern that fit that criteria. So I think we were already playing Dreadbore a bit in Modern. And we definitely were playing it in Pioneer and stuff, I'm pretty sure. Historic and whatever. So this is just a strict upgrade in formats that already play Dreadbore, right? And that's ridiculous. In Standard, we get Dreadbore. So that's also good. I was really hoping they'd just give us Terminate, but this is in some ways even better. I'd wish it was sorcery speed like Terminate, but still, a creature or a planeswalker for only 2 mana with extra value, and you'd be surprised how often that extra value pop off. I've seen so many people like, oh, it's never going to do anything. I don't know, man. At least it's probably going to clean up a token 9 times out of 10. A map or clue or blood or something. It's going to clean something up. Force them to use the treasure right then and there or something like that, So that extra value will pop off more than you believe it's going to, is all I'm going to say. So really ridiculous card. 2 for 1 for just 2 mana. And obviously the first mode takes out a really desirable permanent type, no matter what you're targeting. So just 3.75. Sorcery speed and all, 3.5. 3.5. Because of sorcery speed, let's dock it a 1/4 point. It's not that good. 3.5. Maybe the best removal spell in the entire set. It's really good. Myco Tyrant coming up next. 3 mana, 1 a green and a black for a star legendary elder fungus with trample. Power and toughness are each equal to the number of creatures you control that are fungi and or saplings. At the beginning of your end step, create X 1/1 black fungus creature tokens with this creature can't block, where X is the number of times you descended this turn. I keep thinking about this card. This card's bonkers. This card's so good. I really think that it is, guys. It probably has to go in the Lurgoyf's deck, but that deck routinely descends like 5 times in the same turn. It's very easy to get that deck to descend at least twice, if not 3 times. Every single card in the deck is a permanent if you build the deck correctly. Maybe a couple of go for the throats, but you don't even need that, right? So basically, anytime you mill yourself, you'll be descending. So, if I play Undead Butler, I'm guaranteed to get 3 1/1s EOT. And this guy's at least going to be a 4/4 trample. Again, trample's a really important ability in that deck. You're also getting to go wide. Sometimes the problem with that deck, as I've said before, is that like Lurgoyf, Cruel Somnophage, all of these can be chump blocked. Like they're huge dudes. And you usually go tall in that deck. I've got a Lurgoyf, I've got a Somnophage. They're both 7/7s. You can't chump block forever. Whereas this allows you to go wide, which is not an ability that the deck has had to date, at least. And I think that's important. It doesn't matter if your life total is 12. If I'm attacking you with Lurgoyf, Myco Tyrant, Somnophage, 10 tokens, like you're going to die. So, I think there's something here too. And it doesn't just have to be in Lurgoyf, but I think it's really good in those decks. But all that said, for commander applications and stuff like that too, you are really putting a lot of dudes on your board in like aristocrats decks that you can then sacrifice. There's a lot of stuff you can do with these guys. I really like it. I really do. So I'm going to give this a 2.75. I think it's good. Nikanzel, Current Conductor, is a green and a blue for a 2/3 legendary Merfolk Scout. Whenever a creature you control explores a land, you may put a land card from your hand on the battlefield tab. Whenever a creature you control explores a non-land, put a +1/+1 counter on Nikanzel. This is awesome. This is awesome. It's not Wild Growth Walker, but it is ramp whenever you explore a land, which is probably actually really good. Doesn't ramp by itself, which I don't like. I think a lot of people make the point like, well, why don't I just play like a 2-mana, guy that taps for mana of any color? Like it's guaranteed ramp. It's a dork. My next turn, it's like guaranteed to ramp me on my next turn. I think these are all actually really good points. But Nikanzel could pretty easily ramp you like 3 times by turn 4, and that's going to get out of control. And if he doesn't ramp you 3 times by turn 4, he's like a 5/6. And that's also good for 2 mana. That's Tarmogoyf. You know what I mean? So, like, whether he's ramping or getting big or both, I think he's actually a really good explore payoff. Especially in like Pioneer where you have access to this and Wild Growth Walker as like your 2 drops for your explore payoffs and whatever. So this is a good explore payoff. Ramping is a really good explore payoff. So I'm going to give this guy a 2.5 just to start out with and see if he's actually more powerful than that. Palani's Hatcher up next. 5 mana Margaret Thatcher for 5 mana for a 5/3 dinosaur. Other dinosaurs you control have haste. When it ETBs, you get 2 0/1 eggs that are dinosaurs. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control 1 or more eggs, sack an egg and you get a 3/3 dinosaur. It's okay. Not a rare you're going to feel great about pulling a lot of the time, I think. But maybe in Dinosaur Commander because of that first line of text, like it's halfway Ds. But all things considered, 2. I really want to say 1.75, but I'll say 2. Kentorius Khan, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, Kentorius Khan. This is 5 mana, 3 a red and a white for a 4 loyalty walker. Whenever you cast a spell from exile, Khan deals 2 damage to each opponent, and you gain 2 life. You can also +1 it to create a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token, -3 Quintorius to discover 4, and if you -6 Quincy, you get to exile any number of target cards from your graveyard. Add red for each card exiled this way. Play those cards this turn. Holy crap. Just every time I read it, I'm impressed by this card. 5 mana is a lot, and I'll just say that over and over, no matter which 5 mana card I'm reading. Eventually, it has to matter that there's text on the card. And I think that's happening here. Not only is this sweet by itself, can win games by itself, because, its discoverability, its -3 works with its passive ability in an interesting way. I like that. It also pluses to make guys. I like almost any planeswalker that pluses to make guys. That's great. And then, of course, in just 2 turns, you're really 3 turns, you're getting to its ultimate. And its ultimate is Yawgmoth's Will plus mana. What's not to like about this guy? Like, if you do minus him and he stays on the table, then suddenly all those spells you're casting from exile, you're getting 2 drains for each of those spells when you do his ultimate. That's good. He's great with adventures. He's great in the Pia Nalar deck if that deck wants a 5-drop like this. And I will say this, that Pia Nalar deck sometimes kind of breaks down in the like mid game because too many of its guys get, interacted with basically. Well, it might be nice to have a 1 or 2 of Quintorius in the Pia Nalar deck because this comes down on turn 5. It can kind of help turn things around for you if all your guys got removed or your plan got interacted with. So even though at 5 mana seems like a lot for the Pia Nalar deck, this seems really good in it because if you've already got Pia set up or you've already got adventures set up, then suddenly you're getting a bunch of drains when you cast them, That's great. But even if it's the only card on the table because all your other stuff got removed, again, you're making dudes, you're discovering, you're draining. Like, it does an awful lot by itself. Very self-contained Magic card, even for a Planeswalker, which are always fairly self-contained. So I just really like this dude, like a lot. And I'm going to give him a 3. Like, I'm serious. Like, I want to give him like a 3.5, but I don't think he's that good. I'm trying to be objective. But I do think he's good enough for a 3. This is a very solid Planeswalker. Like, very, very. Saheeli, Sun's Brilliance up next. 2 mana, a blue and a red. Have we talked about this card this spoiler season? I don't know that we have. It's 2 mana for a 2/2 legendary human artificer. You pay its casting cost again and tap it. Create a token that's a copy of another target creature or artifact you control, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. Gains haste, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So it's not Fable of the Mirror Breaker. But boy, is it close. You know what I mean? Like, it's very close to the other side of Fable of the Mirror Breaker. And obviously this will repeat ETB triggers and help you get in for a bunch of damage and set you up really nicely, but it does have to wait a turn to actually do anything. It has to have a decent target too in standard. Like, if I play a creature on 1, this on 2, then like by the time I actually get to tap it and copy something on turn 3, I don't really have anything I want to copy at that point. It doesn't really have anything to copy until like turn 5, turn 4, So usually not only does it have to wait a turn to use its ability, it has to wait like 3 or 4 if you played it on a curve to use its ability. And that's not great. And in the meantime, it's just a 2/2, So I'm not that impressed by this. I'm really not. If you can get the ability snapping off in the mid to late game, then obviously it's really good. But you got to get the Saheeli out. It's got to not die to cut down. You got to pay the activation cost, which is steeper than you want it to be. You got to have something you want to copy, but all of these things are possible. It's not like Fable of the Mirror Breaker wasn't a really, really good card once Reflection. People were really scared of Reflection happening, so the card is good. We know for a fact that this ability is good in standard. All that said, though, 2.25? No, 2.5. Let's give it a 2.5. I hope it's better than I think. But I'm just going to give it a 2.5. All right. Sovereign Okinik Ahau. This is 4 mana for a 3/4 legendary cat noble ward 2. Whenever Sovereign attacks for each creature you control with power greater than that creature's base power, put a number of +1/+1 counters on the creature equal to the difference. So this will snowball pretty ridiculously. If you get like 2 or 3 turns to attack with it, right? Then suddenly it's going to be putting just so many +1/+1 counters on your guys if those dudes got to attack the last turn. So the snowball's real, but I still don't know how good it actually is. It does have the ward. It is likely to stay in play for more than a turn or 2 because of that. That's good. But, you play this and your opponent untaps, plays Shieldred, and you cannot attack into it. So what are you going to do? Maybe you can. Maybe you can. It counts itself. If you can get +1/+1 counters on this before it attacks, it will increase its own power. So, neat. I just want to like this so much more than everyone else does. Probably as a factor of contrarianism. But, I will say the snowball, again, is too real. If it attacks twice, all your dudes are huge. But it only works in +1/+1 counter decks and all that. Probably Commander playable, but who knows. I'm just going to give this a 2.25 for now, but boy, does that have that. This could prove me very wrong very quickly. Squirming Emergence is 3 mana, 1 and a black and a green for a sorcery with Fathomless Descent. Return to the battlefield, target non-land permanent card in your graveyard with mana value less than or equal to the number of permanent cards in said graveyard. So I just feel like this is worded really pretentiously, but that's because the English language just sounds pretentious. So, return to the battlefield. Less than or equal to the number of permanent cards in said graveyard. But one way or the other. I'm having too much fun at this point. We are almost done. We got to bring it home. This is probably a 2.75. Really hard to enable, but boy, do you get a discount on your reanimation spell when you do enable it. So it's pretty good. Ukenback, the Great Mistake. What a card. What amazing art, too. What incredible art. 5 mana for a 6/4 Vigilance Menace, legendary Skeleton Horror. If you descend at 8, you can pay 6 mana and return it to the graveyard, from the graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. And only as a sorcery for that matter. So they really wanted to make this card, they wanted to let you know it was limited playable only. I'll give it a 1.75. Vito, Fanatic of Aklazotz. This is 4 mana, 2, a white and a black for 4/4 legendary vampire demon with flying. Whenever you sacrifice another permanent, you gain 2 life if it's the first time this ability is resolved. If it's the second time you sacrifice a thing, each opponent loses 2 life. Third time, you get a 4/3 flyer token. That's okay, but I think it's just kind of okay. I will say with Bartholomew in play, you can play this on turn 4 and immediately get all of the value out of it, potentially. You know? Like Vito, what is it? Bartholomew turn 2, Tote, Tinker's Tote on turn 3. And then on turn 4, you play this, sacrifice all 3 things from Tinker's Tote. You gain 2 life, they lose 2 life, and you make a 4/3. Okay. And your Bartholomew's a 5/5. Seems like pretty good, but then you have to play Tinker's Tote and Vito in your deck. And I'm just actually not totally sure you play Vito in your deck in Standard. In Commander Aristocrats, you play this card. Basically a guarantee, right? But in Standard, even if there is a real Aristocrats deck, I'm not actually convinced it plays this. I'm really not. You know, you have to sacrifice 2 things just to get the value of 1 Vran. Come on. So I want to try it. I will try it in early access when I get a hold of all these cards. I will try it, but I don't actually have the highest hopes in the world for this. So I'm just going to give it a 2.25 for right now. Whale of the Forgotten is a black and a blue for a sorcery. Descend 8. Choose 1. If there are 8 or more permanent cards in your yard as you cast this spell, choose 1 or more instead. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Target opponent discards a card, or look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 of them into your hand, the rest into your graveyard. If you hit all 3 of these, it is very good. But that's going to be tough, man. It's going to be really late in the game. You're in a deck that wants to play spells like this, so you're probably kind of a control deck, or at the very least a mid-range deck. Which means, you know, not everything you put in your graveyard is going to be a permanent, right? It might be, you might have 12 things in your yard before you can actually cast this for the full value, at which point it's way too late in the game to be casting this anyway. So it's not that I hate this card. I just think that, like, it's bad all the time. Until you can hit this mode, it's bad. And it's going to be a while before you hit that mode. And I don't know, dude. In the kind of decks it wants to go in, you're going to play a lot of non-permanent cards probably, so I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know. But it is technically like a 3-for-1 or something if you can hit the descend mode. But either way, I think it's a trap is kind of the word I'm getting at. I think it's a trap. I'm going to give this card a 2. I'm serious. Zoyoa, Lava Tongue. This is a black and a red for a 2/2 legendary goblin warlock with Death Touch. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, each opponent may discard a card or sack a permanent. Zoyoa deals 3 damage to each opponent who didn't do that. So it could get out of hand fairly fast. You know, I don't hate this guy. I think I want to try him in Anvil, but I don't think he's that good in Anvil. Kind of a mini Braids Arisen Nightmare sort of effect. I think it's kind of cool. I do, but I'm really not sure about it. This is oddly one of the cards in the set that I am the most not sure about. It could be very good, or it could be kind of like the biggest meh, like imaginable, you know. It does do something, you know, the turn it comes into play, potentially, at least. So that's kind of cool. Altogether, it's really hard to score. That's so hard to score. I'm going to give this a 2.25, but this has more room to grow than most cards in the set. This could be a 3 and I just don't know it. But I don't think so. I think it's actually more scuffed than buff. We'll just put it at 2.25. Buried Treasure. We're in the artifacts. 2 mana for a treasure. Sacrifice it, add a mana of any color like a treasure should do. But you can also pay 5, exile it from your yard to discover 5 at sorcery speed. Another tough one to score, but I'm going to just give this a 2. I think that's about right. Careening Minecart is 3 mana for a 3/3 vehicle. It crews for 1, and when it attacks, create a treasure token. Again, not as good as Jewel Thief. Jewel Thief is my baseline for like 3 cards in the set already. So I'll give this like a 1.75. Cartographer's Companion is 3 mana. When it ETBs, create a map token. It's a 2/1. Still not very good. It's just not very good. 1.5, honestly. Chimil, the Inner Sun, 6 mana for a legendary Artie. Spells you control can't be countered. Beginning of your end step, discover 5. Great in Commander, probably. I'm not too sure, actually. But seems like the kind of bonkers thing you'd play in Commander. In Standard, it's probably either you're not going to get to the amount of mana you need to play this, or it's just going to be, they can counter this, so they'll just counter this. They'll blow it up with the Boseiju if they can't do those things. I don't know, man. They'll blow it up with the Lord of the Third Path or something. I don't know. I want to have more faith in this. It sure looks like a fun card. And it does do something the turn it comes into play. It pays you back up to 5 of that mana, theoretically. But even then, man. Even then. I guess you're casting uncounterable spells for free every single turn. That's a way to look at this. But I'm still just going to give it like a 2.5. And that is a high score. And Commander's doing all of that lifting. Compass Gnome up next. 2 mana for a 2/1. When an ETB, search your library for a basic or a cave card. Reveal it. Shuffle. Put it on top. Why don't I put it in my hand? That would actually make the card good. That's why. Make sure you get your land drops. Trades in combat. Limited, it's fine, but not that great. 1.25. Contested Game Ball, the weirdest Maze Mind tome you've ever seen. I don't even want to read it again. I really don't. This just gives me a headache, man. This I will give a 1 because I hate it. Dig Site Conservator is 2 mana. Artifact creature, it's a gnome. It's a 2/1, sacrifice Conservator. Exile up to 4 target cards from a single graveyard as a sorcery. When Dig Site Conservator dies, you may pay 4. If you do, discover 4. That's so much to have to pay. I can sacrifice it, though, for free. So that's going to wipe their descend count while contributing to mine in Limited. And, it's not a bad ability to have in Standard either, but I just think we have better stuff than this if you're going to mess around with graveyards. So I'm going to give it a 1.75. Let's do that. Disruptor Wanderglyph is 4 mana for a 3/4 golem. When it attacks, exile a card from an opponent's graveyard. Piece of crap card. Let's give it a 1. Hoverstone Pilgrim is a 5 mana 2/5 flying artifact golem with ward 2. Pay 2 to put a card from a graveyard on the bottom of its owner's library. Again, messing around with the sin counts and stuff like that. And just keeping them from reanimating stuff. But obviously 5 mana is just ridiculous. Even in Limited, I'm not sure how good this actually is, so I'll throw a 1 at this as well. Hunter's Blowgun is a single mana for an equipment. It equips for 2 mana. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has Death Touch as long as it's your turn. If it's not your turn, the creature has Reach. Neat. Equips for too much. Equips for way too much. But it is kind of neat. I like both abilities this thing is giving. And it gives a PT bonus. Whatever. I'll give it a 1.5. Mezzalantly, the Great Door. This is a legendary artifact. You tap it, draw, and then discard. Or you can pay 4, tap it, transform it, activate only if there are 4 or more permanent types among cards in your graveyard. Remember, types. This isn't Descend. They're counting permanent types. Then you get the Core. It's a legendary land. You can tap it to add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of permanent cards in your yard. It immediately pays you back, by the way, because you have to have 4 mana to transform it. You have to have 4 permanent types in your graveyard, right? So if you tap it, boom, 4 mana. Now, you can't tap it immediately because it transforms. It'll transform and stay tapped. I'll admit that. But the next turn, it's going to start tapping for at least 4 mana. I think there are a total of 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 permanent types in total. So this could tap, just counting creatures, this could tap for like 5 mana really easily. And I think it's good. I will say that decks that want a card like this might not have a buttload of permanent types. Again, decks that want a card like this likely to be control decks. They play instants and stuff. So jury's out. But a card that on the front half, you can kind of just tap it in Celestis. That's not the worst thing in the world. Reanimator decks might just want something like this, especially if they play enough permanent types. But because they ramp into whatever they would reanimate into. You know what I mean? Oh, I can't reanimate it? Sure, I'll just ramp into it. Tapping to add, 4 mana at the very least is busted. It's just busted. It really is. You're paying 7 mana in installments to get this flipped over, but it could very easily pay you back, 4 mana quickly. So it's hard to say. It's hard to say how actually competitive this card is. I don't know that it sees much standard play, but I still want to give this card kind of a baseline 3 because I feel like anytime you see a Nykthos or a Cradle or just about anything like that, it's going to be really sought after in Commander. And when you really consider it, it's not that hard to transform this. Like maybe in Standard, you could make the idea, I'm going to pay 4 mana, tap it to transform. They're just going to Besage you it, and I'm going to feel really bad. That could happen. And that could happen in Commander too. But when you really think about it, transforming or crafting and all that stuff in this set, a lot of it costs a lot of mana and a lot of resources and stuff. This just costs 4 mana. 4 mana, have some permanent types in your yard. You get a Cradle land. You get a Cradle type land that taps for a bunch of mana. It just seems buckled to me, dude. I think it's good. So I'm going to start it on a 3. 6 permanent types. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Artifact, battle, creature, enchantment, land, planeswalker. Oh, our permanent types. Is it a 6? It is 6. For some reason, I counted permanent types. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, 6. It is 6. I didn't think instants and sorceries were 1. I was just counting these words. But for some reason, I counted too many words. It is 6. I'll give this card a 3. The Millennium Calendar up next. A single mana for a legendary artifact. Whenever you untap one or more permanents during your untap step, put that many time counters on the calendar. You pay 2 and tap it and double the number of time counters on the calendar. When there are 1,000 or more time counters on it, sack it. Each opponent loses 1,000 life. Probably the game too, but not guaranteed. I'm starting to come around on the idea this is pretty good. I really am, dude. If you just throw this out on turn 1 and then play sweepers. Turn 4 to populate, turn 5 sunfall, turn 6 farewell. I guess if you do that, then you're not actually activating this on any of those turns. You're not doubling the number of counters on any of those turns, but it's still getting counters by, you untapping stuff. So the first time you do go to double the number of counters, it's going to be a lot. And then the second time you double the number of counters, it's going to kill them. So I don't know. I'm sort of coming around on this card being playable in Standard. Only 1 mana. The investment is a single mana. Play it on turn 1. And it's going to put a time counter on itself next turn because you have to untap the land you used to play it. I don't know, man. I think there might actually be something there competitively with this card. So I'm going to give it a 2.5. I'm going to right there, middle of the road, but still a good playable score because I think there's something there. Roaming Throne. This is 4 mana for an artifact creature. It's a golem. It's a 4/4 with Ward 2. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. It is the chosen type. If a triggered ability of another creature you control of the chosen type triggers, it triggers an additional time, baby. How many Panharmonicons until Panharmonicon is not special anymore? I think about this many, but this is a good card in Commander. I don't know if it's good in 60 card formats. It's a lot to get out, and it probably doesn't do too much the first turn it's in play, but it can. It absolutely can. If you have, just a creature that triggers because you played a creature of the chosen type, then it's going to trigger twice when this enters the battlefield. So that could be good. That's easy enough to engineer. It's kind of hard to kill this. It's a 4 mana 4/4 with Ward 2. That's kind of not embarrassing. Just by itself, that's kind of fine. So I don't know. For Commander play, if nothing else, I have to rate this card a 3.25, and I'm totally serious. It's that good. Let's give it a 3 because again, it's creature type specific. Not every Commander deck is creature type specific, but every deck that is creature type specific plays a copy of this card. I think it's possible that 5 years in the future we look back and this is one of the more expensive cards in the set. I really do. So I'll just stop it at a 3. We'll do that. I think it's that good. Runaway Boulder is, I love this flavor. It's 6 mana for an artifact with flash when it ETBs until 6 damage to a creature an opponent controls, or you can just cycle it for 2. It's actually a halfway decent Magic card, honestly. I'll give it a 1.75. Scampering Surveyor is 4 mana. We thought this card was going to be called Leaping something and Jumping something. Scampering is the English translation. 4 mana for a 3/2 gnome. It's an artifact creature. When it ETBs, search your library for a basic or a cave, put it on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Actually kind of a good Magic card. Actually really is. 2.25. Sorceress Spyglass. What do you give Spyglass? The reprint. What does Spyglass get? A 2.25. Again, to show you that 2.25s can see play, but I actually think this is what this sideboard only, very narrow, only good in certain metas, only tackles a card or two, but still playable. That's probably a 2.25. Sunbird Standard is 3 mana. It taps for a mana of any color, or you can craft it with anything for 5 mana. And it becomes Sunbird Effigy. It's a flying vigilance haste star whose PT is equal to the number of colors that you use to craft it. So, you know, if I crafted it with 1 card, but that 1 card was all 5 colors, this is a 5/5. You can tap it for each color among the exiled cards used to craft Effigy. Add a mana of that color. So you're telling me, if there's an Atraxa in my graveyard, I can craft it with this, and suddenly this taps for 4 mana. This taps for 4 mana. It's a 4/4 flying vigilance haste that taps for 4 different mana. Not different colors of mana, like, oh, it taps for 1 at a time. No, it taps for 4. If I do that, it taps for 4 mana at once. If I do somehow, like if I, you know, craft it with a Tom Bombadil or something that's in my graveyard, a 5 color creature, it taps for 5. This taps for 5. Like, there's a lot of potential in this card, dude. This is a potential 5/5 flying vigilance haste that taps for 5 mana. And like, yeah, you don't tap it to craft it. So this can pay you back, right? No, because it has summoning sickness. Yeah, you exile it and then return it. So it has summoning sickness. It doesn't tap the turn it comes into play, but still, this thing can tap for 5 mana. So I'm going to give this a weird score. I'm going to give it a 2.25, even though it's probably just like a 2. But anytime you see a thing that like, oh, this swings in flying vigilance haste, this swings in for 5. Oh, it has haste. So it does tap the turn. Okay, it has haste. I'm just an idiot. So yeah, if I pay 5 mana and craft it with a 5 color creature, I can immediately pay myself back because it has haste. That's good, dude. That's good. Or I can just swing in for 5 flying vigilance haste. Like, God, I'm telling you, there's something there. Like, and in the meantime, last thing, 3 mana rock. If it never does anything else for you, 3 mana rock. Like, sure. I like this card, dude. 2.25 at least. Swashbuckler's Whip, 1 mana for an equipment. Equipped creature has reach. It also has 2 tap to tap target artifact or creature, and 8 tap. Discover 10. It equips for just 1. A lot of people were in the comments section of yesterday's video like, oh, it's a Discover 10 because like pirates. So a few other people said Indiana Jones again. We were like, oh, it's like an archaeologist whip. So it's like an archaeologist. And like, I get that, but is the whip the thing that's doing that? Is the whip the thing that's giving Indiana Jones the ability to discover stuff? No, not at all. The whip doesn't do that. So, I see that the whip can grab stuff. Somebody said that if you're skilled enough with a whip, it can grab stuff. Yeah, but like 10, 10, grab an Ulamog and be like, you're mine now. And the Ulamog's gonna be okay. You know, I don't think it's gonna work that way. So I just don't get it. I don't get the Discover. I just don't get it. I don't get it. Discover 10, the highest Discover value in the set from a whip? Get out of here. The card itself is only okay, too. I'll give it a 1.5. Tarian Soul Cleaver is a single mana. For legendary equipment, equipped creature has Vigilance. This equips for 2 mana. Whenever another artifact or creature is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on equipped creature. So you attach it to Bartholomew, he gets double counters, plus Vigilance, too. So I don't think this is terrible. I think the equip cost is a little too high. I really do. If you need to know this about me, I think anything besides equip 1 or free equip is too high. So I keep saying equip 2 is too high. I mean it. I mean the equip that's way too high. So, but this is cool. You know, turn all your guys into unruly mobs and beyond. You know, they also get the counter when an artifact goes to the graveyard. It's really good. It's really good. Remember, tokens count. Tokens touch the graveyard. Look it up. I have so much pushback on this rule. Everyone's supposed to know, but tokens touch the graveyard. So yes, you will get counters from them. It's all really good. That's all really, really good to me. A lot of work to get it up and running. But, you know, once it starts giving +4/+4 in Vigilance, then it's definitely worth the investment, you know. If they kill your Bartholomew, this stays out, and you just wait to play another creature and attach it, you know. So I don't dislike it, but I don't love it either. I really don't. I just, you got to do something really good to get me to like an equipment. But we have missed, historically, not on the channel, but just as Magic players. Magic players tend to miss really good equipment when we see them. You know, a lot of people saw Yumazawa's Jite and they were like, oh, this isn't that good. And Jite is one of the best cards of all time. So it's just hard to tell sometimes with these. But I don't think this is Jite territory, Embercleave territory, anything. I think this is probably just like a 2.25 or something. Threefold Thunderhulk is the 7 mana 0/0 that comes into play with 3+1/+1 counters. When it ETBs or attacks, create a number of 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature tokens equal to its power. You can also pay 2 and sack an artifact to put a +1/+1 counter on Thunderhulk. So there are ways to finagle this to where you just get so many gnomes when it attacks, you know. So many gnomes. So I think it's cool, but, you know, it's 7 mana. It's a little gimmicky. It's just too much. Even if it results in a bunch of gnomes, it costs you 7 mana. You know what I mean? So, Maybe a reanimation target in a deck that also wants to sacrifice stuff because it gives you like 4 guys to sack. Maybe in a deck that has Anthem effects that make it come into play with more power, so it gives you like 5 gnomes when it comes into play. Maybe, but again, like I said, ways to finagle, but I still don't think it's that great. Kind of a take on I was going to say Triskelion, but you can't even sack the things to deal damage, so it's not even that. It's like, I guess I'll give this a 2. But big snowballs can happen. Throne of the Grim Cap. This card's so awesome. 2 mana for a legendary artifact. Tap to mill 2. Craft with a dinosaur, a merfolk, a pirate, and a vampire. And then pay 4. To get the Grim Captain, it's a 7/7 Menace Trample Lifelink Hexproof. When he attacks, each opponent sacrifices a non-land permanent. Then you may put an exiled creature card used to craft the Captain onto the battlefield under your control, tapped and attacking. So if there's a card in this set that makes you build your deck a certain way, it is this guy. You know, but honestly, hear me out. 2 mana, tap to mill 2. A lot of decks are going to want that. There are decks in this standard that will totally take a thing that I just mill 2 cards every turn. Let's go, you know. Hit my descend counts, make my Lurgoyes bigger and all that. Seems good. And then, you know, maybe there's one good each of these creature types. You know, 1 or 2 good each of these creature types in standard to where you can play them and not feel embarrassed if you have to actually play them to the table. Maybe you can play, you know, 2 colors or 3 colors and actually hit all of these different creature types. And I think you can. You can play like green, red, black or green, red, white and hit like all of these, right? Merfolk green, dinosaur green, pirate, red, vampire, black or white, or pirate could be blue, you know, merfolk and pirate could be blue, dinosaur green, vampire white, you know, so like you could play just 3 colors and I think pretty easily get, you know, some non-embarrassing versions of these creature types into the deck. And suddenly you're telling me I get a 7/7 Menace Trample Lifelink Hexproof that also like reanimates guys. It's so good, dude. That is so good. I don't think it's as good as like turn 4 Atraxa or anything, but I think it's possible to do this on turn 4 in standard because it only costs 4 mana. And, you know, you've milled 2 cards 3 times by turn 4 with this card. So, like, it is possible. It is possible. I like it, dude. Like, I think that it actually has a chance, but not quite. It probably doesn't really do anything, but I do think it's sweet. You know, you get removal out of it too. I didn't even point that out just then when I was talking about all the good things about the card. So just, yeah, dude. 2.5? Like just based on the artifact half alone, like it's halfway decent. So at least a 2.5. Treasure Map. What do you give this reprint? Treasure Map is a artifact that costs 2 mana. You can pay 1, tap it, and scry 1, put a counter on it. And if there are 3 counters on it, remove the counters, transform it, get 3 treasure tokens in Treasure Cove. This taps for a colorless or tap, sack a treasure, draw a card. Proved to be fantastic last time it was in standard control decks and mid-range decks alike. Really like this. You know, the other day I was looking, building a little black-white deck in Arena. And I was thinking to myself, do we have like a good Maze Mind Tome? Like now that Reckoner Bankbuster's gone, do we have a good way for like decks that don't have a lot of ways to draw cards, basically? And I asked myself that question twice a month since they banned Reckoner Bankbuster, and it's always no. I don't know why I expect it to be any different. Now it is. Now we have Treasure Map. Trust me, this is a really good card. in your mid-range or control deck, scry 1, fix your draws, eventually get massive ramp to help you cast your stuff, and you get card draw. Like, I expected this card to be halfway decent last time. Not many people talked about it, and then it was pretty decent. I feel pretty proud about my evaluation of Treasure Map because everyone said it would be too slow last time. Makes me wonder about the stuff I've been saying is too slow in this set, right? But Treasure Map proved itself last time. I think it'll do so again. And I'm going to give this a 3. I think Treasure Map gets a 3. Like, I really do. I really do. Just a really good Magic card, dude. Really, really good Magic card. It's probably closer to a 2 3/4, but I'll give it. It deserves it. It deserves a 3. It's earned it. Oh, we're in lands. Captivating Cave is the cave that taps for a colorless. You can tap it for a mana of any color if you sink a filtering into it. Or you can pay 4, tap it, sack it to get 2 +1/+1 counters at sorcery speed. It's just fine. These are going to be hard to evaluate, and a lot of them are just going to go into the cave deck. So if the cave deck is real and standard, these all have a place. That bumps them up 1/4 of a point, but I'm just going to give this like a 1.75, Cavern of Souls, 4 1/4. 4.5, it's like I said earlier, it might be as much as a 4.5, but I think I'll go 4 1/4 for Cavern of Souls. If you don't know what this does, you choose a creature type when it comes into play. It taps for a colorless, or you can tap for a mana of any color. Spend the mana only to cast a creature spell of the chosen type, and that spell can't be countered. So this is, again, like mostly relegated to creature type decks, but it is so freaking good in them and gives them a leg up on a piece of competition they're usually really not good against, control decks. And obviously this has proven itself over the last, 10 plus years of it being an available to play Magic card. It was once like $60 to pick up a copy of. Everyone knows the card's good. I'll give it a 4 1/4. Cavernous Maw taps for a colorless mana. It's a cave. You can also pay 2 to have Maw become a 3/3 elemental till end of turn. It's still a cave. Activate only if the number of other caves you control plus the number of cave cards in your graveyard is 3 or greater. This is actually kind of one of the better caves. Now that we have all the caves, this is one of the better caves. I will give this a 2. It's fairly easy creature land, comes into play untapped. All that's good. Echoing Deeps comes into play untapped, taps for a colorless. It is a cave. You may have it enter the battlefield tapped as a copy of any land card in a graveyard, except it's a cave in addition to its other types. So this can be a cradle. It seems okay. I understand why it's a rare. Kind of a Thespian stage that you can have enter the play untapped just as a copy of itself. But if it copies anything, it comes in tapped. Interesting wrinkle. But I'll still give this like a 2. Straight up 2. Forgotten Monument, tap. Add a colorless. It's a cave. Other caves you control have tap, pay a life, add a mana of any color. Will be instrumental if the caves deck needs to be more than like 3 colors. And will probably be instrumental in the 3-color caves deck, if only because so many of these caves tap for colorless. It's going to be an issue, but still. Altogether, good little thing. I'll give it a 2 as well. Hidden Cataract. We're into these. This is a cave that ETBs tap for a blue, or pay 4 blue, tap it, sacrifice it to discover 4. Every single color got one of these. I do think they're better in some colors than others for pretty obvious reasons, but I'm going to put a blanket 2 1/4 on all of these. I think they're somewhat commander playable. You're not going to play them in every standard deck. I think there are standard deck or standard lands that actually do better stuff than this. Not long ago, we got a cycle of enter the battlefield tap lands that tap for their respective colors, and you can pay like 2 mana, tap them, sack them to draw a card. Those see literally no play. I don't think this will see too much play either, to be honest. I shouldn't say literally. Those see play very, very occasionally. And these are technically worse, although you can trade in your land late in the game for an actual card, which I think is good. I think it is good, but I'm not sure how much play it ends up seeing, honestly. I think ETB tapped in constructed environments is a big deal. But Commander, it sees some play. So I'll just give all these a blanket 2, 2 1/4, something like that. Pit of Offerings is a cave that ETB's tapped. When it does so, you exile up to 3 target cards from graveyards, tap it for a colorless, or tap for a mana of any of the exiled cards' colors. Good card. Straight up good. Not great in the early game, obviously. You don't want this to be the first cave that you play, but later on in the game, man, like starting like turn 3, 4, depending on what you've been doing. If you've hit that cave sweeper on turn 3 or 4, then obviously this becomes really good to play on the next turn. Clean up anything out of their yard. Take the Atraxa out of their yard if they're dumping stuff in there. Just keep them honest. With a land, keep them honest. That's pretty good. And then obviously, gemstone mining or whatever is awesome as well. So or like kind of like a reflecting pool, honestly, what it reminds me of slightly in that way. So altogether, man, yeah, 2.25 just because of this ETB trigger. Again, this is a double-edged sword. It really is, because you don't want this to be an ETB tap land that taps for colorless and does nothing else. You don't want that. And if you play it on turn 1, that's what it's going to be, Hoss. So definitely a double-edged sword, but just the fact that it's effectively a free way to take the Atraxa or whatever out of your opponent's yard. Yeah, that's really good. Promising Vein taps for a colorless. It is a cave. You can also pay 1 tap at sack it to search your library for a basic, put it on the battlefield tap, and then shuffle. So Terramorphic Advance, Terramorphic Expanse that you have to pay mana for, but is a cave. A 2. Relentless or Restless Anchorage. Really good creature land here. ETB's tapped. You can tap it to add white or blue. You can also pay 1 white blue until end of turn. It becomes a 2/3 white blue bird creature with flying. It's still a land. When it attacks, create a map token. This is fantastic. This is a fantastic creature land for control decks. It has, an evasive ability. That also means it can block some of the time when the control deck needs to block. Creating a map token is great. You would think a control deck wouldn't want a map token because it doesn't have a lot of creatures. This is a creature. So, it can activate map tokens on this, if nothing else. I think that's cool. So it kind of lets you draw cards. It's an evasive creature that gets in for damage in the late game while still blocking anything. Wonderful creature land for control. I'm going to give this a 2.75. It's a really good card. Restless Prairie is also a creature land. Taps for green or white. ETB's tap. Pay 4. It becomes a 3/3 green and white llama till end of turn. It's still a land. When it attacks, other creatures you control get +1/+1 till end of turn. Pretty decent in tokens decks, obviously. I think this sees play in like Selesnya, commander decks, like literally forever, like until the end of time. Just really, really good card there. Aside from that, though, I don't know. In standard, I'm not sure that it's great, although the +1/+1 could be good there too. Don't get me wrong. So I'll give this a 2.5. But that's good. A very high 2.6, Restless Reef is up next. This is the blue-black one at ETB's tap. Taps for blue or black. Pay 4. Becomes a 4/4 blue and black shark with Death Touch till end of turn. And then whenever it attacks, a player mills 4 cards. Just really sweet. You can mill the 4 if you want to. They can mill the 4 too. It's got Death Touch, so it's pretty decent in control decks for that reason too. Just always threatens to kill anything your opponent might swing in with. That's awesome. So I like this one too. In terms of all these creature lands, I will give this a 2.75. Restless Ridgeline. There's the battlefield tapped. You can tap it for red or green, or you can pay 4 to have it become a 3/4 dinosaur, still a land. Whenever Restless Ridgeline attacks, another target attacking creature gets +2/+0 till end of turn. Untap that creature. So Pseudo Vigilance, 5 attacking power if you have another guy. It's not terrible, but I'm going to give this a 2.5 as well. This is why the llama land that's green and white, I'll give it a 2.6. This is a 2.5. Restless Vents enters tapped and adds red or black, but you can pay 1 red black, have it become a 2/3 till end of turn that has Menace. And when it attacks, you can discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Excellent. Just excellent, excellent, excellent. Not the biggest thing in the world when it swings, but, Rummage is good. Discard, draw. So I'll give this a 2.5 as well. Sunken Citadel is a cave that enters tapped. When it does, choose a color. Tap to add a mana of the chosen color, or tap to add 2 mana of the chosen color. Spend that only to activate abilities of land sources, like these guys, the Restless lands we just looked at. So that's cool. They help you with creature lands, but they help you with all kinds of stuff. We saw that thing earlier, that cave that you pay 4 and tap it and sack it to put 2 counters. Well, this helps with that too. So I don't know. It's kind of neat, but I can't really give it more than a 2 at the very most. I'm really thinking 1.75 to be honest, but in Commander, this will help do a bunch of stuff too. So it'll give baseline 2, right? Volatile Fault is not Field of Ruin. It's a cave that taps for a colorless, or you can pay 1 tap at sack it, destroy a non-basic land an opponent controls. That player may search your library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield, shuffle, you get a treasure token. I've already gone over in great detail how it might be actually better to get the treasure token, especially considering you don't have to play basic lands in your deck. To play this Field of Ruin, it's actually an advantage over Field of Ruin when you really think about it. So I do like this card. I'm going to give it a 2.25, and it is the final card in the set. 3 hours, 32 minutes, 39 seconds. We never hit a split. I meant to hit a split in between each round, but I quickly realized that I'm stupid, and that of course, like actually hitting next will put that window in front of this window. So of course we didn't really get the stopwatch for the whole time. But if you wanted the official time, 3:32:39, definitely not a new PB. Not even close. This is actually one of my longest streams in a really long time. So, okie doke. Long one here, but that's because a lot of these cards are complicated. There's a lot of words on them. I more or less read every card, you know. A lot of the cards are double-sided too, so that didn't help. Just really putting on a lot of time here, because I think our last one was like right at 3 hours. So not our new PB, and that sucks. But I honestly really didn't expect it either. But either way, I had a great time. I had a really good time, and I hope that you guys did too. Cat Lady says hi. Hi, Cat Lady. Thank you so much for the set review, Bearded Truth. You're welcome. My voice will not work tomorrow. Typically, after I do these things, I just can't talk for like 3 days. So I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me and being part of it and all that. Even if you're just watching on YouTube, obviously that means a lot to me as well. So I had a great time tonight. Thanks, guys. I'm going to exit the YouTube video portion of this now, but I'll talk to Twitch for another like 2 minutes before I get out. But in any case, do all the YouTube stuff if you want to reward the 3.5 hours of effort that I just put into this. And check out the Patreon and give me $1 a month. You'll be able to vote on what decks we do this season. It's only $1 a month. I need it. It helps so much. Do that. If you don't want to do that and you want to do free stuff, like the video, that's fine. I'm broke. I get it. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it yet. I think we only need like 6 subs last time I checked to get to 131K subs. So help me out with that. Just 6 of you. That's all it takes. You can also check out Twitch. That's where I am right now. Free to follow over here. Don't be afraid of the platform. It's a fun place to be. A lot of people over here. There's 70 people still here, you know, watching us do this for some reason. We all had a great time. So just do all the YouTube stuff. I'm not going to take up any more of your time because you've already watched 3.5 hours of this video. You probably did it in shifts. It probably took you a week and a half to watch this entire video. Thank you so much. Really, it means a lot to me. But I'm going to get out of here for now and stop wasting your time. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.